Hello everyone and welcome back. This is round number 2 of the same lesson that we covered yesterday. So thanks again everybody for basically showing up. As you guys know, our first class, which was our class 1 intro and basically the topic of aerodynamics, was covered on Monday. But after I took a look at the actual recording and saw some of the issues, that's not really how we like to do productions here at Check Ride Prep. So you know, our goal at the end of the day is to make this as simple and seamless as possible. But as you guys know, technology interferes, and it typically interferes at least once in our course. So let's hopefully check that box, and we'll have no more any other issues moving forward. For those of you that are just joining us and could not make the class yesterday, this is a complete redo of class number 1. This is a live class. We are re-recording it. We'll actually post it in its place from yesterday's class. Hopefully no issues will bug us or hold us down here. For those that are basically rewatching, keep in mind that I will be going through this as if you've never ever seen the class. So we will go through the admin stuff, we'll go through the private pilot licensing requirements and the privileges and limitations. And I will not go any further than the aerodynamics that we covered yesterday. I believe we left off on stalls, and you'll probably notice a few changes as this is a live class. So every time I teach it, it's going to be a little different variation. So there were a couple questions with, for example, basically some of the stalling characteristics. So I believe I have an extra slide in there. But what will end up happening is you're more than welcome to stick around. There's about 180 of you on right now. Just to kind of let you guys know, our tech team has been up all night. They were tweaking the servers or doing whatever they do behind the scenes with Travis over there. My understanding is we can now support up to 10,000 simultaneous connections. So that's more than enough in our class. I think we had almost 1,000 people log in at the same time. So that's the reason why the servers went a little bit haywire the other day, but hopefully we have no more issues. I see people hailing from all across the country here, all the way from Alaska down to Florida up to Maine. So welcome to all of you. We also have students from our friends up north in Canada. I saw a few people from Belize, Puerto Rico, Russia, and elsewhere around the world. So welcome, and thank you again for joining. We are broadcasting on all three of the platforms. So most of you are on our website, but we are also live on Facebook and YouTube as we normally are. And basically for your help, we do have moderators on all three of the platforms, so keep in mind they do this on a voluntary basis. Most of them have been doing this for most of our classes over the last year and a half, and basically they're just trying to make sure to answer your questions the best that they can. Try to keep it aviation related, try to keep things on topic, don't go too far right or left, and the main thing is that they do reserve the right to kick out anybody. We haven't had to do that in a long time, but if something is off topic, too far, or not nice, let's just say it that way, they do have the right to basically remove you from the class. So hopefully we don't have to do that today. This is a much smaller group, so I do enjoy teaching in smaller groups. We might actually power through this a little bit quicker today because there's going to be less questions with a smaller group. We have a little bit more freedom to kind of do what we need to do. Just as a reminder, we will be going through some FAA test questions. For those of you that saw the test questions ahead of time, this is your chance to get 100%. So looking forward to you guys to lead the pack here. For those that are on our website, if you look over here to the left or right of my head, whichever direction that is there, you'll notice that there is the live chat that is currently up. Beneath the live chat, it says type a message, and at the very bottom there, you guys will see something that says example test QA, and it kind of cuts off with a ... Anytime that there's an FAA test question that shows up on the screen, all you're going to do is click the vote button. It will have a basically a brief review of the test question. And here, this is just reminding you that if you are utilizing our website, the test questions from the FAA are multiple choice. It's either A, B, or C. Make sure to not put A, B, or C in the chat itself. It took us a couple tries to get that right the first time. And very simply, just read the question, answer it, and that is it. Just wait for the results. Keep in mind that whatever you answer, your answer is locked in. You'll notice that I'm not able to actually change it, and give us about 30 to 60 seconds. We'll make sure that the majority of the class has their answers in, and then we'll review the answers and discuss it if we need to do so. If at any point in time that the question is fairly lengthy, one of the limitations of the system is it does not allow too many characters. So if you see ... that's just me saying, oh, I ran out of space. Reference the slide on the screen. We always put the slide up as well. So keep that in mind moving forward. All right, a couple other announcements that I got for you guys besides moderators and chat. A lot of people were downloading the mobile app yesterday, so just keep in mind the mobile app, I believe the way that Travis set it up currently is you will be able to play the replays of the class, but live streaming is not supported within our mobile app at the moment. Obviously, if you have a mobile device, you can always live stream on the Facebook app or also YouTube, and then always go to your computer as well. So, the video recordings, these classes are all recorded. We're going to ditch the old recording from yesterday. Like I said, it wasn't up to our standards here at Check Ride Prep. So typically about 2 to 3 hours at the end of each class, we will go ahead and post that recording once we're able to transcode it and download it and whatever they do behind the scenes there. And then we usually send you guys an email just reminding you that it is up and ready to go. Finally, we'll get into more about the help desk or password reset. Seems like we got that all squared away, but I will do a quick review of the website as well, just like I did yesterday. And there is a getting started basically video. It's kind of a website tutorial. You can find it on YouTube. We put it on Facebook, and it's also when you log into the site on the portal. Same website you see beneath me, portal.checkrideprep.com. When you first log in, if you guys were to scroll down to the very, very bottom of that page, you'll actually see the video posted there as well. So if at any point in time you get lost in terms of how to navigate, or you missed, what I said because I said it too quickly, you can always go to that website tutorial and basically fast forward to whatever section you need. Finally, on top of all of that, we will be taking breaks every hour. So traditionally, I'm here on the West Coast. So we will be taking a break at 6 o'clock in about an hour, and 7 o'clock. The first break is always 10 minutes. The second break is 5 minutes, and then we kind of push through. Classes will run roughly till about 8 or 8:30 my time, so about 3 hours. We'll try to get you out of here a little bit early today. And then finally, we'll be able to answer any of your questions at the end. I typically stick around for about 20 minutes as we kind of move through the course here. I'll see if I can answer any questions that are maybe outstanding at the end of class. All right, so glad to have everybody back. And if you need to refresh or do anything else, F5 is the magic key. If you are on a computer, F5 will basically refresh the page. Occasionally, sometimes it freezes or lags. Keep in mind, we broadcast on 1080p, but sometimes your internet, depending on what your internet capabilities are, it will usually downgrade the quality. Also keep in mind at the bottom right, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, and also our website, there's a little gearbox, and if you click on the gearbox, traditionally it will say auto, and what that's doing is that's trying to basically, based upon your bandwidth capability of your internet, it might degrade the quality of the video. So if it seems a little fuzzy, all you got to do is move that auto switch to one of the other selectors, 1080p or 720 or any of the others that are going to be a little bit better quality in HD. So if it does seem fuzzy, that's going to be on your end. The recording will come out in HD as well as we move forward. All right, so with that, here is what we're going to be covering again for today. So as you guys know, this is basically round number 2. It's going to be the intro and aerodynamics class. I'll do a quick introduction about myself and a little bit about who we are. We'll talk about how the course works, what are the requirements to fulfill the course, what's the purpose of the course. We will also get into the private pilot licensing requirements. What can you do and what can you not do? Those are known as privileges and limitations. We'll talk about medical requirements. And then we'll basically shoot forward and get into the aerodynamics. So that'll probably be in the second half of class. We'll be talking about the aircraft components. So what are the different components and how do they work? What are the major features of an airplane, different parts of an airplane or sections of an airplane? Then we'll be covering aerodynamics, so theory. So this is lift, weight, drag, and thrust. We'll also be getting into ground effect. That's the other one I threw an extra slide in since there was some confusion about that yesterday. We'll be getting into wingtip vortices, wake turbulence avoidance, and that's really, actually, we're going to stop right about there because we stopped right at stalls yesterday, and I don't want to go any further forward than what we've covered thus far. Also keep in mind that basically lesson 2, it's a little bit unusual, but lesson 2 will be picking up on tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a new lesson, and we're going to be covering flight instruments. Actually, let me do it in order. It's going to be aircraft systems in the first half. Then the second half will be flight instruments. If we don't finish anything, we'll basically carry it over to the next class. And then we're going to be on the normal schedule, which is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. There's 12 lessons. It's over 4 weeks, and it's every time at 5 p.m. You do not have to attend every single class. We'll go through that here in a second. You just have to watch the recordings or some version of it, okay? All right, so real quick about us. If you guys don't know who we are, once again, my name is David Tush, and I'm going to be your instructor over the next 4 weeks. I'm going to be the one that's representing Check Ride Prep for us, and we've been doing these free classes for quite some time. My background, I started flying in 2001, and, not a great year to start, as you guys know. Ended up finishing up my flight stuff in 2015, went to the airlines for a bit, and flew out of LAX on the Embraer 175. So had a good time, and eventually the company closed, as they all do. With the regional carriers, and in between I was instructing, kind of doing things like this. But I guess our goal here at Check Ride Prep is really just to make you guys be aware of aviation and see that it is possible. Anybody can do this. It's a lot of information coming at you. In addition to that, we also kind of want to we want to create a competent pilot at the end of the day, one who is safe and that is consistently showing those values. So our courses are not designed for the bare minimum. I'm not going to teach the class as, okay, remember that question, it's definitely going to be A, and this is B, and this is C. We're going to go through and cover the foundational material, but we're also going to talk about more than that. We'll try to interject some videos and some experience in there as well. In addition to that, you also have pilots that are currently in the class. So the moderators are either instructors or ATP pilots. Some of them have a wide variety of experience. In addition to that, you also have a lot of pilots who take these classes for refreshers. So everybody's here to help everybody, and we're just trying to make this a fun environment at the end of the day. This used to be the cubby hole that we lived in the hangar. We are based out of the Los Angeles area in California. We also have offices in Nevada and Wyoming. So we basically provide everything. All the courses are from private, instrument, commercial, and kind of all the way up through the food chain to becoming an instructor, which is a CFI and CFII course. So we actually specialize in live online ground schools, and we actually help people prepare for their writtens, orals, and practical exams. Don't know what that process is? Don't worry, I'll take you through that here very shortly. But just want to let you guys know that you guys are in good hands, as I've said before. This is kind of our success rate. We've kept on top of these numbers. Last year, we got 93% of our students through. This year, we've actually bumped that up. I'm hoping the more people that take this class, we can get that even a little bit higher. So 94% of all of our students have basically finished the class and received an FAA endorsement from us. So to date, we've had over 100,000 students take our classes in the last year and a half. In this case, 94% of them will finish this course at some point in time and get their FAA endorsement. 99% of those people will go on and pass the FAA knowledge exam, which is what this course prepares you for the first time, which is awesome. There's always the outliers out there, but as long as we can maintain these numbers or get them a little higher, that is our goal at the end of the day. Okay. The first day of class was yesterday, but for those of you that are just joining us, we're going to call it today. So it's technically Tuesday, September 7th. The way that this course is designed is there's 12 different lessons that make up the Private Pilot Ground School. Each of the lessons is approximately 3 to 3.5 hours, including the Q&A at the end. You're more than welcome to hang around if you have any generic questions. Some people get bored at night and they stay out. Also, just keep in mind for our East Coasters out there, I understand that 3.5 hours puts you in the 11:30 to 12 o'clock midnight range. It's perfectly fine. We usually see the East Coasters drop off like flies at the last hour. If you need to drop off for whatever reason, you can watch the recording the next day and catch whatever you missed in that last hour or 45 minutes that you had to drop off with no regrets there. That's the reason why we do record it for everybody. All of our live classes are taught, except for the exception of this kind of bonus round 2 class is going to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So please go ahead and adjust for whatever your local time is. When you guys show up, typically it tells you like 4:45 or 6:45 or 7:45 on the screen in the portal. It's actually your computer's adjusting to whatever time zone your computer's in. It's kind of automatically doing it for you. As you guys know, we traditionally start the music and the countdown about 20 minutes prior to 5 o'clock roughly. And what this course is designed for is really either as a refresher for current pilots or to really get people through their FAA written knowledge test, which is a big component. The only way you can take an FAA knowledge test is you actually have to go through specific training. We have to cover certain things, and then an instructor basically has to sign an endorsement, which is basically like a piece of paper that says, I, blah, 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 trained so-and-so, and then you can actually take the official FAA test. You can't just go into a testing center and take it without that document. They're not going to let you sit for that exam. The class materials for each one of the classes does become available the day of the class, so traditionally about a minute past midnight, Pacific Coast time that is. So you're going to notice that you're not able to necessarily look at lesson 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. For example, lesson 2 will come out later tonight at midnight our time, and then you guys should be able to look at that ahead of time, look at the materials, and we do post everything on there. So I'll go through that here in a minute. As a quick reminder, this is, for those of you that have been here yesterday, you should know at this point, this is not a watered down course. This is the entire enchilada. So everything that you guys see is normally what we would teach in person in ground school. So people eating their dinners, having their textbooks. We'll go through some of the recommended textbooks. There's nothing that's specifically required for this class, but these are things that will definitely help you and help you to succeed within the aviation field if it's something that you do enjoy. And we have a wide variety of folks that take this class. So we've got students, I think the youngest student we've ever had was 12 that's passed this class last summer. We have folks like business travelers that always grab the window seat and they just want to know what the heck is going on when they look outside the window, okay? Then we have folks that have no clue about aviation. They're just here and it's a free class and something to learn. We have folks that are, want to become professional pilots. So you have the wide gamut and array of, kind of a very large grouping. So everybody is kind of falls somewhere within there. So, if you're not wanting to become a professional pilot, don't feel bad. Enjoy the class, enjoy the material, and, kind of sit back and relax just a little bit as well. All right, so with the website navigation, if you go to the portal.checkrideprep.com in the event that you were unable to log in yesterday, this is what you should see. Traditionally, we have some announcements at the very top here that you probably saw. We did our server reset earlier this afternoon. Very simply, if you guys signed up through the class, you should have already received your password and username. If you've done so, you can go ahead and click sign in. If you need a username or password, just go ahead and click the sign up button, the blue one, fill out the information, and then one will be emailed to you very shortly. Once you're actually logged into the portal there, you should see probably an avatar or a blank picture, assuming if you haven't uploaded one with your name on it. And this is basically the home page. So in the event you ever want to get back to this, you can just, click on the Check Ride Prep logo there, and that will take you back to this page. As you can see, there's actually two different menus here. There's a flyout menu on the left-hand side, and then there's another menu, and I'll show you what those look like here. The flyout menu on the left-hand side, there's 3 bars actually at the top. So if you were to click on that, the reason why we call it a flyout is it'll expand, and if you click it again, it'll contract. These are basically shortcuts to get you in and around the website. I do go through these in a bit more detail with the website tutorial that's also available on that homepage as discussed. The other thing as well is if you go ahead and click on the name or in and around your name, there's a little chevron here. Click that and you're going to see a drop-down menu. You'll see a few extra things such as order history, courses, events, account, and profile. Some of these have sub-menus as well, so if you hover your mouse over them, there might be additional menus that pop out depending on how Travis designed it. At the end of the day, in order to get and access the free courses, basically any of the courses, whether you're a lifetime member or not, all you're going to do is click on the online courses button. This is on every single page of the portal. Very simply, we put all the free online courses at the top. We have all the paid courses at the bottom. All you're going to do is click on the Private Pilot Ground School. We call this GS8, Ground School number 8 for this year. And that will take you to the current set you guys are probably already watching at this point. Once you guys go here, by clicking on this, you're then going to get into what actually looks like the course itself. You have a couple different options from this point. So when you guys show up, you're usually going to see, something that is blank before it actually starts. And then you'll see something that says join the conversation. I think most of you guys have figured that out. And then once we go live, you'll actually see us or me on here. And you have the chat function where you can talk to the instructors and moderators and the team and other folks as well. On the left-hand side, this is kind of your master menu. I did it a little bit in reverse here, but normally it'll say week 1 at the top. And then you've got week 1, basically 1 through 4, and we break out each one of the lessons in there. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like as well. In the event you want a larger screen version, maybe this is too much to look at, you can always click this big blue button here. If you click the big blue button, it's basically going to get rid of a lot of the clutter, and it will show you just the actual stream itself. The only problem with that is it does not allow you to take notes. There is a notes button here. If you want to take notes, they are saved to the server. You do have the ability to download them and save them in a Word document or a PDF. Your notes are your notes. No one else can see them. We can't see them as administrators or anything like that. So, and they are safe, and it will basically save in real time. Once you click on that and open it up, you can actually move that around the screen wherever you want and type away or take screenshots or whatever you need to do to save your material and information. If you were to scroll down a little bit past the actual live stream, this is the other section that I want to show you guys. So, what we have here is you obviously have the kind of the master menu on the left-hand side. Like I said, this is the correct order. We have our class number 1 here. There is a green check mark that will appear. Keep in mind that green check marks have no bearing on you actually having to attend the class. The green check marks will only show up if you have actually completed the lesson quiz with an 80% or higher. That's not a requirement for that class, even though a lot of you will ask that over the course of time. So If you have watched the class and you've taken the quiz and you don't see a green check mark, do not be alarmed. That's not a requirement for us, but if you want to, if you're anal retentive like me and you want to see that green check mark, you can take the quiz as many times as you want and get an 80% or higher, and that green check mark will appear for whatever lesson it is. Also remember, for those that are new, you can always look at the welcome start here and the frequently asked questions. You can find all the textbook materials, the recommended places for purchasing those materials, and some pilot stores out there like Sporty's, Amazon, Spruce, etc. To find these recommended materials from us. And other than that, we basically provide you guys everything else. So looking down past the live stream here, anytime that we have a document that's going to be relating to our discussion, you'll find that in the course documents and downloads. These are things that you can look at ahead of time the day that the class is ready to go. And also in the event that we talk about any type of websites, we do provide those links there, so no need to write furiously while it's on the slide. They are all right beneath the live stream just for easy access. You'll notice that this one is highlighted in red. This is called the Private Pilot Testing Supplement. We encourage you guys to click on this. This is on every single lesson under the course website links. If you guys click on this and download this booklet, it's something that is not required, but if you are one who may have trouble seeing things digitally, you might want to download it because you have the ability to zoom in on the FAA test figures that we use in our questions. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what the testing supplement looks like and how to use it here in a minute. All the homework is once again not a requirement. We put that in there and it basically allows you to read ahead in the text. The recommended book for this class is Rod Machado. It's just a recommendation. If you have another textbook, Jepson, ASA, or any of the others out there, you're more than welcome to use those and just cross-reference whatever the topics are for the next class with your copy that you have in hand. We also include free materials from the FAA, so we do include the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. So these right here are just downloads directly from the FAA. We basically take only the topics that we need and we include those in there. So if you're waiting for a textbook or if you just want to run with the FAA's resources, you can take a look at the homework right beneath the course website links. At the very, very bottom, if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, this is the number one question that we always get is where is the quiz? Go all the way down to the bottom. You'll see something that says lesson content. And very simply right here, it says free private pilot aerodynamics class quiz. You can also get to that quiz right beneath class number 1 over here. And either way, it's going to take you to the quiz. So you have 2 ways to get to it. And that will actually open up the quiz. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. That take notes function is pretty simple. It looks like a mini word processor. So this is just, it auto saves all the time. Like I said, if you want to print your notes, download your notes in Word or anything else, you have the ability to do so. And then your notes are your notes. No one else can take a look at them for you. Going on to the quiz is not mandatory. It is not mandatory. I would highly encourage you guys to do it because the final exam is basically taking 60 questions from all of the quizzes that you guys will take. And if the more that you can be exposed to the quiz questions, the better off that you'll do on the final exam as well. Very simply, you're not going to have this many questions. Travis has kind of reduced this down a little bit here, but all it is it's going to have the actual question itself. If it refers to a figure, you actually have a figure right here. You do have the ability to click on that and enlarge that. And basically, it's pretty simple. It's either A, B, or C. Go ahead and click the button. Click Next in the far right corner to save the answer. In the event that you're unsure, maybe this is something that you're just puzzled by, you're not really sure about what the answer is, and you want to kind of continue. At any point in time, you can click the review question, and what will end up happening is it'll mark that question as yellow, kind of to cue your memory and go back to that question before you actually submit it to the server. Every time you make a submission, it is saved in real time. You have the ability to go back through your test questions, review your past answers, how well you did versus what the correct answers are, and there's also explanations behind each one. So you guys have the ability to take a look at that as well. If you were to click on that image, very simply, you can make it full screen, which is the one on the far left. You can use the magnifying glass and actually zoom in to your heart's content. And then in the event you need to go back to the actual test question, just hit the X in the upper right-hand corner. Okay. These are all pulled from the FAA testing supplement. You do not need the testing supplement, but once again, I would encourage you to download it as shown before. The FAA testing supplement is a printed document that you will get when you take the official FAA exam at the testing center. For our purposes, you guys have the ability to look at it digitally. It is a fairly large document, and basically anytime that the test question references a figure or a legend, All you're going to do is figure out where that figure is. That's figure 4. This is figure 21. And then it might even give you some more specificity as you kind of drill down. So for example, it may say refer to figure 21, area 1, and we can see here there's a red circle with a number 1 in there. We'll be using the FAA testing figures throughout this class. The reason why I also want you guys to download it is there's some helpful material at the very beginning. There is some legends and some things that can basically help you and give you a little bit of a leg up when it comes to the test if you forget certain things. Okay? All right, the way you're able to check your quiz scores, and once again, I walk you guys through this through the website tutorial in greater detail, but very simply, go to your name at the very top, scroll down and hover over the courses. If you do so, there's going to be a flyout menu again, and you're going to go ahead and click on something called Course Progress. Once you see the course progress, you'll see all the courses that you're enrolled in and you've taken. At this point, all you're going to do is click on the little caret here, or that chevron, and do not click on the free private pilot ground school. If you do that, it just takes you back to the course. It's kind of a silly setup the way they have it. But all you're going to do is click on that little chevron, and what will end up happening is the menu will expand and you'll see every single quiz or test you've ever taken for that specific course. So here's one that I took on April 26th of this year, and this is the Aerodynamics one, scored a whopping 33%. Don't let that reflect my teaching abilities here. And as you can see, there's this stats button. All you want to do is click on the statistics button, and there's going to be a new window that pops up that will show you the original results of how you answered, whether it was correct or incorrect. And it will also go through any type of explanation of why an answer is correct or incorrect. At the end of the day, you want to try to figure out, what you did wrong. That's kind of the best way to learn these things. And we'll give you some resources that you can use as well, including the Facebook group and so forth as you guys do that. I know that a lot of people will not necessarily remember exactly how to get to this step, but keep in mind it is in that website tutorial. You guys should have no problem there. If at any point in time, most of you have been using the Portal Help Desk. As you guys can see, the Portal Help Desk, or basically our help desk, is just an electronic ticketing system. It allows us to serve you guys better. So whether it's a lost password, you're just lost on a question, technical question, maybe it's a aviation related question, anything else, billing question. This is how you get our attention. In the lower right-hand corner of every single page on our website, there's a little yellow headset. If you hover over it with your mouse, it kind of sticks out like a tongue. Go ahead and click on that. Once you get to there, you'll see something that looks like this. You're going to go ahead and click on Submit a Ticket, which will open up the box. Put in, if you're logged in, it'll pre-fill out your information. We do not need your telephone number. Just let us know what the problem is and be as descriptive as possible. Sometimes we get things where people say a link is broken. We have over 1,000 lessons. Unfortunately, if you don't tell us which lesson it was actually broken in, it's very difficult for us to track down in a timely manner. So we might actually come back to you and say, hey, can you just let us know a little bit more? You also have the ability to provide screenshots to us as well. So in the event you just don't understand, you can take a screenshot of the question and send that in. And it's basically routed to either the technical team or the instruction team, depending on whatever type of question you have. Okay. One of the things I'll also point out, I think you guys saw it in the previous slide. I just didn't really point it out when I logged in. Please, 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 I love to have updates from students and so forth, but you can see my message box on this system. It's kind of broken there. It's 176 and growing. If you have a technical question, if you have a password question, please use the help desk. Do not email me directly, because then I have to open up a help desk ticket for you, and it takes actually longer. Our turnaround time on the help desk is typically going to be about 12 to 24 hours. Traditionally, the first couple of days of class, it takes us a little bit longer because there's a few more of you that are having some problems or understanding how to log in or out. Okay. Other than that, I don't discourage you from asking questions. If you guys have airline questions or questions about buying planes or anything else, feel free to ping me. Let me know how you guys are doing with your tests and your progress. It's always exciting to see. But the most efficient way to kind of get some of those more technical things out, just go ahead and use the help desk as described. All right. Finally, the whole point of this class is really designed to get you through the written test, which is also called the knowledge exam. The knowledge exam is done by the FAA, and it's basically 60 questions, and they give you 2.5 hours to take it. The FAA does charge, and it's a testing center that provides it. You have to go to an official testing center. The charges range, I've seen somewhere between $100 to $170, $175 to sit for the exam, and this is where that endorsement comes in handy. So the way that you get the endorsement from us is very simply, you just need to watch all 12 of the lessons. It does not matter whether you're watching live or recorded. It does not matter whether you're watching on our website, YouTube, or Facebook. You can mix and match to your heart's content. Just make sure that you've watched all 12 of the lessons. The server does record that. There's no way for you guys to know if the server records it. Unfortunately, it is done behind the scenes. Finally, the very, very last day of class, which I believe is October 1st, it's a Friday, the final exam will come out. That final exam is 60 questions, and you're given 2.5 hours. It's the only timed exam that we have here. We're trying to mimic the FAA test to the best of our ability, and they are completely random questions. So every time you open up that test, you'll get 60 different questions you may have not seen before. Very simply, you just need to get an 80% or higher, and if you meet that criteria, you will get the endorsement. We don't charge for the endorsement or anything else, just like the whole course moving forward. You have unlimited attempts to take that final exam. So I've seen people take it 20, 30 times in a couple-day period. It's up to you, but even if you pass, I would encourage you to continue taking the exam as you kind of push forward, because the more times you take it, the more that you're going to be exposed to those FAA test questions. Okay? All right. Any questions so far? Good to go with that? All right. So finally, before we move on to the actual private pilot material here, trying to go through this a little bit quicker since most of you probably seen this stuff before. As the final reminder here for you guys, everybody always wants to know what's the catch. I don't know why it does a double S there. Didn't do that yesterday. There is no catch to this class. You guys will hopefully realize, we kind of put a lot of effort and time into this. Most people, if it didn't go right the first time, they probably wouldn't have re-recorded this live, or, it's a lot of talking for me and our team to kind of put these together every single class. You guys will be able to make it through the class just like thousands and thousands and thousands of people before you. We provide all the materials. We provide the instruction. We provide the support. And we even give you all the test questions that should help you prepare for the FAA exam. So there is no catch to this. Okay, very, very simple. If I always like to see people, when they start to sign up and it's always a scam or something like that, and then by the end, we're 12 classes later, 4 weeks, we can make you guys believers. That's really our goal. We're just here to kind of spread aviation and kind of get everybody on track. So the only thing that we want is everybody who starts with us, we want you guys to end. So we're going to kind of push you along just like a college or high school class. But once the class ends, unfortunately, the instructor goes home. I'm not going to stick around forever and ever. So if there is a catch, this is the only catch that I can really tell you guys. And we always do this for every single class that we've taught. The free access will end at the end of class. So our very, very last day of class is going to be Friday, October 1st, I believe. We give you 5 extra days after the end of class, and very simply, that's to basically catch up on any of the material that you may have missed. We know that life comes in the way and things come up, and you also have the ability for those extra 5 days to take the final exam. You have unlimited attempts to take the final exam. You just need an 80% or higher, and it basically will spit out an endorsement. Go through the mechanics of how to get your endorsement on the last day of class. In addition to that, people that are looking for FAA Wings credits, which is a safety-related program, will provide additional information at the end of class as well, that final class. The class will close on Wednesday, October 6th at 12 noon Pacific time. Keep in mind, the reason why we do this is it gives us a higher completion rate. If we just kept this course open year-round, it's just like all the books on my shelf behind me. I wouldn't actually, there's plenty of books back there that I bought with all of good intentions, and I've never actually done anything. They just look cool on a bookshelf now. If we kept the course open year-round, our completion rate would be not even close to 90%. I mean, we're talking 10 to 15% for open courses for the majority of them. So we're going to hold your feet to the fire. We want you guys to show up. If you remember, if you can't show up to the live classes, we try to make this as accessible as possible. You guys have 3 different platforms to watch this on. The YouTube stuff and the Facebook stuff will stay up until Wednesday, October 6th. You have it on our website. You have it on the mobile app. The mobile app is good for both Apple and Android devices. The only thing the mobile app can't do is watch the live stream, but you can watch all the recorded stuff after we post it, after the actual class. So keep in mind, That is the only thing that we ask. I will remind you guys every single class basically about this slide, so that way it's very clear. No one on the last day of class should say, I didn't know that the access ended. You guys have almost 35 days and counting to basically go ahead and crank out and get everything done. Like I said, you got a 94% completion rate. We have over 100,000 students that have taken these classes, so plenty of butts have been in your seats. The only thing we ask from you is for you guys to show up and do the work as per se. So it is going to take a little bit of effort from you guys. Keep in mind that anybody that is a lifetime member, this does not apply to you. Lifetime access means lifetime access. I will share that with you because we still have our Labor Day sale on. This is my little public service announcement. I'm going to keep this short and sweet, but you guys will hear this throughout the class as well. Very simply, if you guys want lifetime access, we do know that things come up, life, work, relationships, education, things kind of get in the way. We have the best intentions and our best foot forward to finish things, and sometimes we just need an extra week or 2 weeks or more, okay? So the lifetime membership is traditionally $349. I believe they set it for 51% off if the math in my head works out there, which is basically a single payment of $171 or 3 payments over 3 months. It's basically, it's 3 monthly payments of $57. And this does include the private pilot ground school. Keep in mind that all of the courses that you guys see on the left, the private pilot ground school and the associated oral prep course and the instrument, commercial, UAV, and the flight course, those are all professionally recorded in a studio such as this. They're not taught live. And instead of watching a live course where you have to watch basically 12 3-hour lessons, we basically break those down into mini lessons. So there's no breaks, there's no intro music, we don't have Q&As. We're trying to be nice and concise. Usually our lessons are 5 to 15 minutes, and they're usually about 60 to 70 lessons per course. So if that is something that interests you, we will basically hold on to that, and we'll keep that price until next Monday. In addition to that, if you want to pursue additional certificates or ratings later on, you do have the more advanced courses, including the instrument, commercial, and the 107 Part 107 course. The flight course, for those of you that don't know what it is, that's called an electronic flight bag. That's kind of where we keep all of our maps and our charts. That's the most common, electronic flight bag out there. It does a lot of cool things like file flight plans, do weight and balance, and a number of other things. This is an Apple-only product. If you're looking for the Garmin, not a Garmin version, but if you have an Android, if you're an Android-only user, then that would be Garmin for you. We don't have a course on that yet. You do also have access to our live weekly seminars and Q&As when they are available. And you also have access from our team of instructors 24/7 as well. So if you guys have questions or anything else, you guys have access to that already for the next 35 days. But if you guys need additional time, we're here to support you guys in whatever you guys may or may not need. Finally, you have unlimited practice quizzes and exams. Every time you guys take a quiz or an exam, the questions are going to reset. They're going to be different questions in a different order. It's going to pull from our database. We've got about 6,500 test questions throughout all of our courses, so quite a bit have already been uploaded for you. In addition to that, you have the 810 training videos that we have in HD and 4K, and we're actually adding a bunch of in-flight videos coming up here pretty soon to correspond with the flight maneuvers lessons and private pilot training. So those are actually being shot this week and next week. You'll also have access to the FAA written test endorsement and the Wings credits as well, so there is no time commitment if you are a lifetime member. It's always, like I say, it's the few who pay for the many. People who do become lifetime members actually help us in their support of allowing us to basically continue free classes for everybody else. So it is almost a community thing at the end of the day, and we can't do it without our lifetime members. So for that. You also have access to all of our past webinars. I think we have about 30 or so and growing, and the flight maneuvers lessons are out for the private pilot. You also have access to the instrument and commercial, which are almost done. Moderator Ryan is working on those for us, so hopefully he'll get those done pretty soon. So other than that, we also did yesterday, and I'll honor this today, for the first 100 students, we are doing a 1-hour ground instruction. Basically, if you were to meet with an instructor one-on-one, traditionally, I used to charge $70 an hour when I did it. In the LA area, it can be a little bit more expensive than that. But this is an individual one-on-one lesson. We traditionally book these through Zoom. It is not something that expires, so a lot of people bank it and save it for a later point in time. And really, if you're getting stuck with whatever it is, maybe you're getting stuck with some of the materials or the concepts, it's a perfect way for one of our instructors to sit down and meet with you. We can answer your questions in detail. A lot of people save it as they're getting ready for their check rides and their oral. where they're trying to basically go over flight plans and make sure that their T's are crossed and their I's are dotted. So this is available to you, and basically it's the first 100 students. When you guys sign up, if you guys sign up, you'll get a coupon code, and then it's basically all done through a self-booking engine theirs. But once the 100 is out, the 100 is out. This is something to kind of entice you guys. I would encourage it because this is still less than the cost of a single lesson with a flight instructor. Okay. So that is it at this point. That is it for my public service announcement. I do appreciate it. I'm going to, like I said, try to keep these short and sweet. Finally, for the Apple and Android app, it is now available. So with the Apple and Android app, depending on whatever you have, whether it's a tablet or an actual mobile device, you can go to the Google Play Store or the Apple stores, and under Check Ride Prep, either one word or you can separate it, Check Ride Prep, space prep, that is. You can find that app and download it. This is going to be synced to the server as well, so whatever you do on the mobile app will sync to whatever you're doing on the website and vice versa. With the mobile app, you actually have access to download all the course materials, the videos, the handouts, the quizzes, and the tests. You can actually take the quizzes and the tests offline. You do not need to be connected to Wi-Fi or a cell signal. Remember, the only limitation, like I said before, is really that you cannot watch the live streams on the app as of yet. Travis is working on that, and we're constantly making modifications and updates. Through the app, you also have some other functionality. You have the messaging function, so you can message us. There is the groups function, and you have access to all of the documents that we have. I think we have about 5,000 documents in our library and growing, so you're more than welcome to contribute to that. Depending on whatever you are looking for moving forward. Okay. All right. So with that, before we continue, do you guys have any comments, questions, concerns? Did I cover it in thorough detail? Hopefully it was much clearer today than it was yesterday. Once again, I do appreciate everybody's patience on that. You guys good to go out there? Take a sip of water as you guys are. Problem with live streams is traditionally you guys are about 30 seconds behind from whatever I say. So usually as I'm ready to move on, everybody then has all their questions. Sounds good. There we go. There's a 30 seconds. Lorraine. Yep. I like that. Very simple answer there. Yep. For Michael. Carl. Yes. Ralph. Good to go. Yes, Michael. Awesome. All right, guys. So with that, what I want to do now is you guys know a little bit about me and you know a little bit about Check Ride Prep. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share a short 5-minute video with you from our friend Swain Martin. He gave me permission to share this video that he created a couple years ago when he was in college, and I do appreciate it. We've been sharing it with all of our classes. For those of you that don't know Swain Martin, you can find him on social media. You can look him up on Instagram and also YouTube. He has a huge following on YouTube, and what's kind of amazing about this young man is he started documenting his process and journey in aviation from the first flight he ever took through his first solo to when he got his private pilot license, I believe at 17 or so. And then he ended up going to the University of North Dakota, documented kind of his journey there. Ended up at Mokulele Airlines for a little bit. Did a couple of films and kind of YouTube videos out there with that company, which is a commercial carrier out in Hawaii. And then eventually was hired by Envoy Airlines, where he does a lot of, airline-related material. So if you are interested in joining the airlines for whatever reason, you want to know about schedules and bidding and, how training works and that type of stuff, and what are the pros and cons of layovers, they have really good videos to watch. Amazingly, this is a pretty high-quality video for 6 or 7 years ago. You'd be amazed to see what his stuff is today. I can put a link in the chat while the video plays. But once again, I would encourage you to check him out. Pretty amazing young man. I think he's 23 or 24 now as well. While this video is playing, what I want to know a little bit about you guys is kind of why aviation. So like I said, we have a wide range of students in these classes. We have people that want to become professional pilots, have no clue what aviation is, people who are just looky-loos that kind of like to look out the window and just want to know what the heck is going on, personal curiosity, personal growth, whatever it is. Where are you located in the country or the state? So most of you are in the States, but we have some folks outside of the United States as well. Where are you going to be currently located? And you also have, I kind of want to know what your goals are. Is this just for fun? No problem with that. We welcome you guys. Is this something that you want to pursue, lifelong passion, something that you started and stopped, whatever it may be? And then where are you in the process? Have you found an instructor? CFI is a certified flight instructor. Have you found an instructor? Have you started flight training? Are you at 0 hours, 100 hours, 20 hours? You've soloed? And yep, Swain Martin is associated with Bold Method. I believe he is a co-owner now of Bold Method, which is pretty cool as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let this video play. I'm looking forward to seeing all of your answers in basically throughout all three of the platforms. We'll talk about it when we come back, and we'll take a break at the top of the hour as well. So we'll still squeeze in a few more bits of information between now and then.
Fly room heading runway 27 right, clear for takeoff. Runway heading clear for takeoff, 27 right, 015.
right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about who you guys are. As you can see, we have folks from all across the country in the U.S. and a few from international as well. So welcome to all of you. Surprisingly enough, in this class, a lot of first responders. So thank you to all of our firefighters, EMS, and also our police officers out there in Oklahoma, and to the military, the active, and also our veterans that are serving with us. So we've got a wide variety of folks, okay? So everybody from tower controllers and, for the tower controllers, when we get to the radio communication section, you guys are the experts. For the folks that are A&Ps, which are airframe and power plant mechanics for airplanes, please, I defer to you guys tomorrow, and we're talking about aircraft systems. You definitely know them better than we do. As the running joke goes, pilots break them, mechanics fix them, right? We don't know anything when it comes to how to repair an airplane at the end of the day. So we're pretty useless in that sense. We're pretty good at breaking them for our mechanics, though. So, and the age ranges, right? We have people who said life got in the way. That's a very common one. Aviation is not the cheapest thing in the world, but it's really, really cool to learn. And no matter what, it's not something that you have to finish. There are people who start it just to kind of get a flavor, get to the solo phase, and then they kind of tap out. That's all they wanted to do. We've got folks jumping out of airplanes and everything else in between. So great to see that. Glad everybody can share more appropriately this time than last time. All right, so before we go on break here, what I do also want to cover is just a couple of the materials before we move forward. As I said, there's really no required materials in this class, but there are a couple books and things that I do recommend for you. The first one is Rod Machado's Private Pilot Handbook. This is currently the 3rd edition. Whether you get the 2nd edition or the 3rd edition does actually not matter. I've got the 2nd edition in my office here, and it's full color. The reason why I like Rod Machado, I've taught probably about 20 to 30 ground schools over the last couple of years, and I've used pretty much everybody's textbooks. I've used ASAs, I've used Jepson's, I've used, who else is out there, Gleim, and I've also used Rod's books as well. For anybody here that's a flight simulator fan, the voice on Flight Simulator for all the instruction over the years has been Rod Machado. He's kind of a jokester as well. But the reason why I like Rod's materials is that he breaks down complex topics and he makes it very digestible. At the end of the day, everybody teaches the same material. It's just the way that we deliver it, the way that we explain it. Everybody's slightly different in that regard. So we cover pretty much everything you need to know in the class, but books like his are great reference material. At the end of the day, we also run out of time. So if we run out of time, I can't necessarily go into a lengthy discussion of every single why. Books like this are great reference materials. These really rarely go out of date. The 2nd edition is pretty much just as valid as the 3rd edition. You can find it on his website. You can also shop around on Amazon or elsewhere. I'm not requiring you guys to get a book. There's no homework out of this book, but it is incredibly helpful. You'll also notice that some of the slides that I use are taken directly from his book on the Instructor set as well. Okay, not everything is from here, but if you've already purchased another book and you've already kind of started, it's very common for us pilots to have every single textbook out there over the course of our training because we don't know what works and what doesn't. Stick with what you got. You can just cross-reference the materials, and I'll give you some free resources as well moving forward from the FAA materials. The other things that you will need are going to be some type of aviation chart. Does not matter whether it's current or it's expired. And you can get either a sectional chart, which covers a much larger area of a state or multiple states in some cases, or you can get a TAC chart, terminal chart, which is a zoomed-in version. You do not need to write all this stuff down. Remember, if you go to the Welcome Start Here in the upper left-hand corner of the portal, it will give you basically the images and all the information, and it also gives you some recommendations like Amazon, Sporty, Spruce, and a few other pilot shops that are known nationwide to ship as well. The other materials that we have here are really for our flight planning. So our very last class, or second to last class, I believe, let me look at the calendar here real quick. Our second to last class is our flight planning class, and that will be held on Wednesday, September 29th. That is when we're going to be doing flight planning. That's when we're going to be grabbing weather and figuring out how to plot a course and doing some calculations with the following materials. You can get through that, but you're definitely going to be at a disadvantage if you don't have these materials, and they're fairly cheap to get your hands on, whether you got to borrow them from someone or just purchase them. The first one is an aviation plotter. There's really two different types of aviation plotters here. So when we look at it, this is a fixed plotter. Basically, it's fixed because it looks like a protractor, but this portion does not move. It's specific to aviation. It measures nautical miles, which is what we actually use measurements on for the map. And it also has the ability to measure a course that we use as well during the flight planning phase. This one's about $5. In addition to that, we do have the more expensive one, the $8 or $9 one from ASA. These are a little bit easier to use, and these basically, it's not fixed, I don't know what they call them, but it does actually spin and move here. For the purpose of the class, I will show you guys how to use both of these. They're honestly, once you learn how to use it once or twice, you guys will be fine moving forward. And then finally, we have our E6Bs. You can get a fancy schmancy one. This is one that a student donated to me. This is a metal version. They slide up and down. We have a wind side that basically measures our ground speed to a few other things and a wind correction angle. On the flip side of that, we have the flight computer right here. These run a little bit more expensive. I think they're like 25 or 30 bucks. This is the one that I started off with and I still use today. This is the one I've had since 2001. It's just a very cheap Jepson one for like $8 or $9. It is made out of paper, so as long as you don't spill coffee on it or something, it should be good forever. It works exactly in the same way. There's honestly no disadvantages to either one, or if you want to go electronic and get the calculators, you're more than welcome to do that. Just keep in mind that we don't have the time to cover the functionality of all the calculators. So I'll be showing you guys how to use this stuff in detail as well. I also forgot to tell you, for the first week, anybody that does purchase the lifetime access, I have 3 Rod Machado books, a couple FAR Aims, which is our regulatory books. I think I've got 4 or 5 E6Bs and plotters that we will send out randomly. Travis does the drawing at the end of the week, usually on Monday. So anybody that did purchase in the first week, we do actually have some free giveaways for you guys as well. I forgot to mention that in the first class as well. All right. Let me just cover one more thing. Just indulge me for another 2 minutes, so that way we can actually cover the materials, and we'll take that break here. So there are some other course materials that are available to you for free. There is what is known as the PHAK, which is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, which is on the left-hand side, that reddish maroon book. This is all of the ground material, the theory, the weather, all the stuff that you're really going to need to know. This is what we primarily use as a supplement in this class. These are government publications, so they're entirely free. They are produced by the FAA. There are companies out there like ASA and others that do print them at a cost. So if you do want a physical copy of this book, you're more than welcome to purchase one. I think the easiest and cheapest way is just on Amazon. They're like 20 or 30 bucks. But we do provide the exact chapters. So when you looked at the homework that I showed you earlier for the next class, I gave you the exact chapters for the flight instruments and the aircraft systems that we're going to be covering tomorrow in class. The blue book is another copy as well. This is the Airplane Flying Handbook. This is teaching you everything you need to know for your flight lessons, all the different types of maneuvers that you're going to learn how to fly. It does cover both private and commercial maneuvers in here. It also talks about landings and takeoff and certain other things that basically pertain specifically to flight. Remember that this class and this course is not really designed to teach you how to fly an airplane. That's really designed as your flight lessons. This is primarily to get you through all the knowledge you need to know before you hop into an airplane and actually get you ready for the knowledge test. And this will also help out with most of the foundational material as well, minus the actual fun stuff, which is flying the airplane. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We're going to go and stretch our legs. This is a much better way to end the first hour than yesterday, so do appreciate everybody for coming back. What we're going to do when we come back from break is we're going to talk about what you can and can't do as a private pilot. We'll talk about how you actually become a licensed pilot. We'll also quickly review how to get your student pilot's license, your FAA medical, what are the requirements for those. When would you do so? And I'll give you a few last-minute training tips in terms of ways to save money and some tips with this course as well. And then after that, we'll go ahead and push on towards aerodynamics, and we'll make our way all the way through stalls, and we'll end for tonight. We'll pick up tomorrow with lesson 2. All right, so with that, I'll see everybody back in 10. Stretch your legs, grab something to eat if you need to, recaffeinate, rebourbonate, rebeerinate, whatever your beverage of choice is. I'll see everybody back in a few. All right, everybody, welcome back from break. Hopefully you had a chance to stretch your legs, grab something to eat, and we'll set it in for another hour. Basically, at the top of the next hour, 7 o'clock, we'll take another 5-minute break, and then we'll finish up what we need to cover for today. So welcome back. We've basically covered all the admin stuff. At this point, we're going to move on and start talking about the private pilot requirements and medical stuff, and then we'll move on to the aerodynamics. So getting back into it, there is no age requirement for this course. So like I said, I think the youngest person that's passed our course is, I think, either 11 or 12. And, you know, at the end of the day, the only requirement is that you could actually start flying at any point in time. You could actually start logging your hours prior to the actual age limit when you need to sit for the check ride and get your actual ticket. In order to get your private pilot certificate, which is what this course is designed for, you need to be at least 17 years old. But as I said before, you can take courses like this, and you can also start flying prior to that and logging the time. You also need to be able to read, write, and converse fluently in English, just common language. You're going to need to obtain at least a third-class FAA medical. We'll be talking about that here in a minute. And you also need to basically receive and log ground training from an authorized flight instructor or complete a home study course, which is the purpose of this class. So basically, we're trying to knock out number 4 and get you ready for number 5. The fifth point here is that you need to pass an FAA knowledge test. The official test from the FAA needs to be passed with a 70% or higher. So preferably the higher the better, the easier your check ride will be. If you miss 15 questions, your check ride might be a little bit longer. If you're the person who gets like a 99%, your check ride might be a little bit easier because the examiners are going to probably ask you less questions. You do also need to accumulate 40 hours of in an airplane of flight instruction time, some type of flight instruction and actual flight time that includes both instruction and flying by yourself, which is what we call solo. And keep in mind, this is the minimum. So this is the legal minimum of what is required. In my experience working with students in the past, when I was instructing full-time a couple years ago, it varied wildly. I didn't have any students that hit exactly 40 hours. The closest I got was a student with like 42 and 43 hours. Most of the students, national average is around 65 to 70 hours of flight time is pretty common. And on the flip side of that, I've had students closer to 110 to 120 hours. Everybody picks up the flight a little bit. Some people pick it up a little bit quicker. Some people are a little bit more challenged in terms of spatial environments and kind of situational awareness, which is a little bit harder to teach. So you really won't know until you hop in the airplane. Some people are just really, really quick and learn, and some people, like I said, take a little bit longer. At the end of all that, once you do all your 40 hours, you'll actually be able to do your check ride, and your check ride is comprised of 2 different components. You have to complete the oral first, which is basically going to be conducted by either an FAA safety inspector or it's either going to be a designated pilot examiner, also known as a DPE, which is more common nowadays. The oral is traditionally somewhere between 2 to 5 hours, and they're all going to be, they're not really true or false questions or anything like that. They are all going to be scenario-based questions. So you're going to be given a flight plan. You have to pull the weather for the day and actually do the calculations and do your performance numbers and come in prepared and prove to them why you can fly that airplane and everything else in between. Once you're done with the oral, you get to the airplane, which is called the practical section, and that is about an hour to an hour and a half. Once you're done with that, and you'll basically go up with that same examiner. You'll show them all the maneuvers. You basically get one opportunity to show them each one of the maneuvers that you learned during your training: steep turns, stalls, different types of takeoffs and landings, emergency procedures, navigation, diversions. The list goes on and on there. Everything goes smoothly. You'll come back on the ground. You'll get your temporary ticket, and you will be a licensed pilot. The way that those 40 hours breaks down is the following. It's either going to be dual or solo. Dual is what we call dual instruction, which means that you're up with a instructor, a certified flight instructor that's flying with you. Part of the 20-hour minimum is going to be 3 hours of cross-country flight. And a cross-country is not LA to New York or anything that extreme. It's just 50 nautical miles away from your primary airport. It's a straight line distance, so you just take a ruler and you draw a straight line. You figure out what that is. And it has to include a landing outside of that 50 nautical miles from that primary airport. You'll also do a nighttime flight training 3 hours at least, and one of those is going to be a cross country of 100 nautical miles. So here in the LA area, we traditionally brought people from Camarillo, which is up north, down to Long Beach and back. That's traditionally what works, or out to Bakersfield. You'll also have to go to an airport that does have a air traffic control traffic pattern and do 10 takeoff and landings at night to a full stop. You'll also be subjugated to the hood. It's a wonderful device. Basically, we have you wear these funny little goggles, and the idea behind it is that you can't see outside. It's basically blocking your vision except for the instrument panel itself, and it's simulating if you were to fly in what we call instrument meteorological conditions, or I'll dumb that down. If you were to fly into a cloud, can you keep the airplane in one piece and get out of it? So you'll be subjugated to that for 3 hours, and at the end of all that, you'll also have your solo hours. So you need 10 hours minimum of solo time. 5 of those hours is going to be during your solo cross country. During your solo cross country time, you'll also have an hour. I'm sorry, not 1 hour, but one long solo cross country of 150 nautical miles total distance at 3 different airports. You got to come to a complete stop at full landing. And they all have to be done with an operating control tower. So as I said before, this is the 40-hour minimum when you guys are looking for flight schools locally. A lot of times flight schools, they cheat a little bit and they're going to quote you the 40 hours. So something might seem really cheap, but keep in mind, try to base it off the national average, which is at 65 to 75 hours. And if you take longer, it's not a big deal. Okay. If you do it quicker, still not a big deal. Reality is once you guys get your tickets, you'll be amazed. I remember when I first got mine a long time ago, I was surprised that I got it. And you're basically cut loose from the flock and outside of the training school, or the training house as we call it, and you're going to learn more in those next 50 hours flying by yourself or with friends than you did in the first 50 or 60 hours that you did with your instructor. So that's kind of putting you back into the real world and going and exploring and doing some fun things out there as well. So I did see in the comments, this stuff is expensive. It is not necessarily the cheapest hobby in the world. Most of the pilot's licenses are going to be based upon where you live in terms of pricing. If you're somewhere on the coast, somewhere on the East Coast or the West Coast, pricing is traditionally going to be higher than other parts of the country. Feel free to shop around. At the end of the day, it's really not about the flight school. The flight school is there to really maintain the airplanes, the scheduling, do all the paperwork behind the scenes. Find an instructor that you are comfortable with. You can do a discovery flight at different schools and see which ones work. Those hours do count. Try to find someone that you are comfortable with in the sense that you're going to be cohabitating with them for a long period of time in a very small space. Make sure that they can teach you the concepts very clearly, and they have a game plan moving forward. It's not kind of a nonchalant effort of just come back tomorrow and we'll do something, right? Try to figure out what is the game plan with the weeks ahead. Okay, so that is the private pilot license in summary here. Now, all of these requirements are going to be based off of coming from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and we use something called the Airman Certification Standards, also known as the ACS. And the ACS is a little bit different for anybody that's a little bit older. Some of you may have remembered the PTS, which is the Practical Test Standards. The older version was very much, tell me what density altitudes, and you spit out a response. Nowadays, the ACS is more scenario driven. So, what would happen if you flew into South Lake Tahoe and this was the temperature and this was the field elevation, and they give you a bunch of other components there. Within the ACS, this is a public document. It is a PDF, and it is actually below the live stream here. You can print it out. A lot of people don't look at it until they're getting closer to their check ride. This is everything that tells you, the applicant, the student, the instructors, and the evaluators, people who are going to be judging you at the end of the day, what you need to know, consider, and do to actually pass the knowledge and the practical test. So when we make these courses and design these courses, we are making sure that we're covering all of these little points here. So, for example, for pilot qualifications, one of the topics that they want us to teach you guys, which we're going to talk about on Monday, is this one, privileges and limitations of a private pilot certificate. So what can you do and what can you not do as a private pilot? There's always 3 different components. You always have the knowledge component, you have the risk management component, and you have the skills component. On your check ride, you will always be tested in one area of knowledge, one area of risk management, and all of the skills, depending on whatever is actually being tested at the given time. So you don't really have to worry about this too much. Just realize that this is where all the material comes from. We're not making this up as we go along. Like I said, every instructor teaches the same materials, just our delivery and the way that we do it, or maybe our explanations. That's really what differentiates us from instructor to instructor. Also, when you take your official FAA exam at the testing center, assuming you do not get 100%, it's going to spit out some testing codes for you. What you would want to do is reference the ACS document. And for example, if it gave you this testing code at the bottom and it said Papa Alpha India Alpha Kilo 2, that means that you'd go to this section of the ACS and it would say, hey, you missed a question pertaining to something in the lines of privileges and limitations. So most of the time the instructor will ask you, do you remember what the specific question is? And you'll probably say no. So they will just review with you what are all of the privileges and limitations. What can you do and can you not do as a private pilot? So this is really a single source set of the standards for both the knowledge exam, the written, and also your practical test for your check ride. All right, onwards and upwards to your medical. The medical is something that is required, not for this class, and it's also not required for your initial flight training. You will need your medical certificate and also your student pilot's license by the time you solo. Traditionally, that will be somewhere between 15 to 20 hours of you actually in an airplane. So it's not something that's crucial. Just keep in mind, medicals are pretty easy to get. You can book an appointment just like a doctor's appointment, and you get it the same day, assuming there's nothing that would preclude you from getting a special issuance or something along those lines. The student pilot's license, on the other hand, because it is provided by the FAA, there's usually a 4 to 8 week period where it takes to process and actually mail you the card to your house. So it doesn't hurt to get a jump start on that ahead of time if you're going to start the training process. The FAA medical, remember, they have to be done by an aviation medical examiner. Those are called AMEs. The little link there that you see is also located under the website links below this live stream, so you don't need to write that down. You can just put in your zip code. You do have to go to an aviation medical examiner. You can't just go to your local physician to get a FAA medical. They're pretty easy to get if you can breathe and have a heartbeat and pretty much everything else and can see fairly well, you'll get one. Keep in mind that a lot of people get concerned about medicals. If you have a medical condition out there, I've had students in the past that have been colorblind. There are students that we've seen, amputees that fly. People who are diabetics can fly. There's a lot of wide variety, a lot of conditions out there that do exist, and people are still flying today. So if it's something that is questionable, we're not medical doctors. I can just tell you some of the students that I've had in the past and what worked. There are a lot of also exceptions as well, which are called SODAs and SODAs, and you can basically go to the doctor. You'll have to give them some medical history, maybe go to a specialist to get cleared, and you'll still get your medical. It might take a little bit longer than just walking in and out. For the most part, if you're a healthy human being, by the time your appointment is done and you pay the guy or gal, then you'll walk away with a document and your medical certificate. If you have any questions, go find a local AME in your area. Just give them a call before you book the appointment. Just rattle off whatever condition you may or may not have and see, what their 2 cents are as well. A lot of them are willing to talk for a few minutes without actually going through this whole process. The most basic type of medical is called a third class medical, and this is designed for the student, recreational, and private pilots. So this is the most basic one. For all of you out there, if you're above 40 years of age, it's only valid for 24 calendar months, approximately 2 years. If you're a little bit younger and less than 40, it's valid for a whopping 60 calendar months, roughly about 5 years. You could also get a second class medical, which is designed for commercial pilots, people who are going to fly for hire or compensation. So charter pilots, cargo pilots, pipeline patrol, photography, any of those would basically qualify. And then all of your professionals at the very top of the food chain there, all of your ATPs, your airline transport pilots, your Part 135 and Part 121 scheduled carriers like Southwest, Delta, American, FedEx, UPS, etc. Those guys all have a first class medical, and there's just a few more requirements to that. In the event you want to become a professional pilot, I would recommend just go for the first class and see if there's any type of limitations. At the end of the day, the difference is pretty minimal in terms of pricing. The AME that I used to go to, he didn't charge any difference between first, second, or third class medical. So it didn't hurt to go with the highest rather than the lowest. All right, here's your FAA student pilot's license. So like I said, this is not required for this class. It's not required for the purposes of starting your flight training. You're just going to need the medical and also the student pilot's license in your pocket physically by the time you actually solo and get into an airplane by yourself. So that's still a little ways away, but it doesn't hurt to start this process early. As I said, there's been a lot of delays with COVID, and USPS has been shipping times have been taking quite a bit longer. So you never know, and it's a fairly easy process to get this done. You do not need to get a medical before a student pilot license, and you don't need a student pilot license before a medical. They're completely independent applications. That was the other question we got yesterday. If you are going to get a student pilot license, you just need to be 16 years of age or older to get it, unless you have an intention of basically becoming a glider or balloon pilot. Then you can be as young as 14. You just need to have read, speak, and understand English, and have some type of government-issued ID, passport, state ID card, driver's license, military ID. Any of those will work for this process. Where you're going to go is to the wonderful IACRA website, which is an FAA government-run website. This is called the Integrated Airman Certification and Rating Application. Very simply, when you log in, this don't write this down. This is also beneath the video as well. You're going to go to the register button on the upper right-hand side. It will ask for a lot of personal information. It is the government, of course, so your social security number, your date of birth, all that wonderful stuff. It is a secure website, and it goes directly to the FAA. Once you're all registered and you have that done, you're going to start an application for a student pilot license. You'll put in whatever the information is that's required. You will, at the end, submit it, and you will have to sit. You will either have to go to the FAA office, or, which most people don't do, or you need to track down a flight instructor, a local flight instructor, to finish processing the application. The reason why it's this two-step process is that flight instructor or the FAA is going to verify your identity, so they will need to see your government-issued ID, and they just need to make sure that you speak English. Basically, if you're talking in conversational English, that qualifies, okay? Just as a side note here, because we always get asked this question, check ride prep instructors, we cannot approve your student pilot's application. It has to be done face-to-face. It usually takes 5 or 10 minutes when you go to a local flight school. I haven't heard of any flight schools charging you anything to do this process. And traditionally, if you're going to do a discovery flight, you could get it done at the same time as well. The reason why it's done face-to-face, a couple reasons. They're verifying your identity. They're also having you sign digitally the document. So it's impossible for us to sign it and then for you to magically sign it as well digitally. You kind of have to be in the same place at the same time. So just keep that in mind. We always get comments or questions on that, but it's a fairly easy process. So you fill it out on this website, you submit it, you go track down a local flight instructor or flight school, and then you just go in with your application number. They pull up your application, they check your ID, they make sure you can speak English. They have you sign it in front of them, and then they submit it, and then magically the card is in the mail, hopefully within 4 to 8 weeks. Okay? All right. Last little study tips that I can give you guys for this class and this course. So remember that this course is designed, not necessarily designed to teach you just the written test, as I said in the beginning. I don't like to teach A, B, C, and this is not rote memorization. That's never my goal. I'm always looking to, our company here is always trying to produce basically safe, proficient pilots, and the other component of that is consistency as well, right? We're always looking for consistency in what we do. So this is going to teach you the written test and beyond. You might see material that goes well beyond the written test that will help you prepare for the oral as well, and that's not a bad thing. We're just trying to give you a complete picture of the aviation environment. And you guys will realize pretty quickly that most of this information is new. We're expecting you guys to learn about engines and avionics and flight instruments and maps and new regulations you never heard about and how to navigate. So you're all in the same boat. We've all been through this process. It is a bit overwhelming, but just take little bites at a time. And eventually this will all kind of start to sink in and make sense as you kind of go through the course. So, just take it a little by little. Take advantage of all the quizzes and the tests that we make available to you. We've uploaded about 900 of the questions for the private pilot course, roughly. Even though that you're not required to take the lesson quizzes, I would highly encourage you to take a look at them. Remember that the final exam is pulling from those quiz questions. So the more that you can expose yourself ahead of time and kind of see how the FAA is going to trick you along the way, the better off you're going to be. And I will try to give you the most challenging questions throughout the live course to make sure that we can identify them and talk about them in real time and kind of go through them that way. Try to identify why you got it wrong. Remember, you can always go back through all your exams and you have the ability to look at the explanations that we put in there in terms of why A is correct or B is correct. And if you still can't understand it, remember you can take a screenshot of it and open up a help desk ticket and send it to us, or even a faster way, you also have access to the Facebook group. So on our page for Check Ride Prep, there is a Check Ride Prep group. I think there is about 12,500 to 12,600 students in there. And it's beyond students. You have instructors, you have our team in there, you have our moderators are in there that are also admins. I can guarantee you if you put a question in there, you'll probably get a response within about 5 or 10 minutes, even faster than from the help desk. And really, it's just everybody helping everybody. So you have a wide range of folks really just trying to help out through there. But remember, you can use this as a resource. You can email us. For some of the more complicated questions, it's been faster for me instead of typing it out just to give you guys a voice response and record it and then just send it in the email as well. The FAA testing supplement is your friend. We'll talk more about that moving forward. But like I said, print it out, or not print it out, just have it on your desktop just so you can kind of see what information is in there. And at the end of the day, try to have fun. This should be a fun process. You do not need to know every single thing that's coming out of my mouth. I see a lot of people write down everything verbatim. There are people walk away with a couple hundred pages of notes from these classes sometimes, but this is something that really entails lifelong learning, okay, because it's really safety related. So people who have taken this course multiple times, and when I take new courses from other instructors as well, there's always something that you forget and things that you relearn or things that you just learned for the first time, and there's things that are always changing as well. So the way that those 60 questions are broken down, this is pulled directly from the ACS, but here are your 60 questions. These are the percentages that you see here in all the different categories. These are all the categories that we are going to cover over the next 4 weeks as well. Sorry, just taking a drink of water there. All right, then finally, here's my 2 cents from me in the sense of how to actually complete your training efficiently. So number one, if you are here and present, great job. This is actually the number one way to save money initially. People who participate in ground schools either prior to starting their flight training or concurrently while doing their flight training, you can traditionally save a few $1,000s by doing this. Remember that instructors are like lawyers or anybody else. If you walk into their office and ask you a question, the bill starts, the time starts. And it's the same thing with the airplane as well. It's $70 an hour. If you ask a very simple question that you probably could have looked up, and if or if you took a class like this, it's going to be far cheaper to do it this way than pay, $20 for that one question that took 20 minutes to answer. So this can significantly reduce your costs, and you'll see in the first week, we're going to cover aviation maps, charts, airspace, flight instruments, and regulations. By the time Monday rolls around, if you were to hop in an airplane for Discovery Flight, you'll at least know what the heck you're looking at. You'll know briefly how to look at a map, and you'll know some of the basic regulations as well. And I mean, that puts you, light years ahead of someone that knows nothing coming in as well. Okay. Work with your flight instructor and plan ahead. So good flight instructors usually have a plan of action. We don't usually, in the past, when I used to flight instruct, I don't anymore. When I used to do it on a regular basis, it was, okay, well, this is what we're going to be doing on Tuesday. This is the game plan. I want you to read this chapter. I want you to learn about, power on stalls, or what we call departure stalls now. If you have an instructor that's very laissez-faire, where it's kind of, we'll just do whatever comes to mind when I show up, try to stay away from that. The more that you can, stick to a topic and kind of stick to a schedule, the better off you're going to be as well. And that will allow you to kind of read up on the materials and kind of get a head start prior to doing that. So the other thing too is the airplane is honestly the worst place to learn. You have so many different things that are, attacking your brain at once. You've got air traffic controllers, and you've got your instructor yelling at you or talking to you. You're trying to basically control this airplane in 3 dimensions and everything else. And in addition to that, when you start that engine, it is billing you every 6 minutes. That's 1/10 of an hour. Okay, so if you have a question in the airplane while you're on the ground when that engine's running, that could be a $30 question. So try to get all your questions and everything you need to know pre-flight done, go through a post-flight debriefing, what went well, what didn't go well, and just try to come prepared and spend your time wisely. That will save quite a bit of money. I've seen students who like to engage on a lot of questions that don't need to be answered right away, but if they want them, they want them. Try to fly at least 2 to 3 times a week. I understand that this is a very expensive hobby or profession. Unfortunately, I wish it was a lot cheaper. We have seen the costs be as little as $6,000, and we've seen the costs go, upwards to $12,000 to $15,000, depending on where you're actually going and the type of aircraft that you're using. So, the more that you can fly, this is truly like a use it or lose it, type of event here. The reason why I say that is just like calculus that I took in college, God knows how many years ago, I can barely operate a calculator today. So if you ask me to do anything calculus, it's like a worthless endeavor. For those who fly like once a month, in my past experience, for students who basically come in every 30 days, honestly, we spend about a third of the lesson trying to go over everything that they forgot in the previous lesson. And that's the reason why it's better to kind of be a little bit more consistent and on top of it if you can. There are some tips and tricks out there. There are a lot of aviation scholarships. Some people will save enough money to get through their solo and then save another chunk to get through their cross countries and then, save that final chunk for their check ride and do it kind of in a chunked methodology, whatever that is. There's also other ways of kind of scraping together funds. I would take a look. I think we have an aviation scholarships page where we put together all the different major companies. They give away millions and millions of dollars a year. You just got to do a little bit of legwork. Sometimes they're essay based. There's a lot of great organizations out there. You have OBAV and Women in Aviation. You have the National Gay Pilots Association and other organizations like EAA and AOPA that also do a lot of aviation scholarships. So there's plenty of opportunity for those that are willing to take that extra step. Finally, stick with traditional aircraft. A lot of people is kind of going against the grain, but try to stick with something a little slower and dumber in the sense of Cessnas or Pipers. The faster and cooler aircraft, I know they're awesome. Cirruses, they have air conditioners, they have parachutes. Diamonds are really cool too. They've got like the latest and greatest G1000 TV screens and everything else. The reality is that these aircraft cost significantly more. Diamonds will usually run $170 to $180 an hour. A Cirrus can run upwards with the turbos of around $400 to $450 an hour. So not only is it a lot more expensive to rent these airplanes, based upon the more advanced capabilities, that parachute, you have to learn how that parachute operates as part of your check ride. That fancy TV screen that has all the information on it instead of those old round dials, we call that the G1000. That is a lot. It's a really cool device, and unfortunately, you got to learn all the different functionalities, the menus, the submenus, the bells, the whistles, and that usually takes students an extra, 3 to 5 hours, depending on how tech savvy you are. And in addition to that, these aircraft are much slicker and they're much faster. So if you are trying to, do maneuvers or those types of things, it's actually a little bit easier to do it in a slower airplane rather than one that's going twice as fast. Now, that being said, if you have already put down the down payment in one of these airplanes and you're buying a Cirrus at the end of your training or for the purposes of your training, then obviously it does not make sense to start off in a Cessna or Piper. That would probably be the exception that I would say for you guys. That are probably going to pursue that route. There are some students that exclusively buy certain airplanes, and if that's what you're going to end up flying, that's the one that I would say you should attempt to train in. For everybody else, though, you can always upgrade to a Cirrus or a Diamond or any other aircraft out there once you get your pilot's license. It's actually easier to do that. It's going to be far cheaper than doing all of your training in that specific type of aircraft. So some people may not like that, but once again, that is my little 2 cents of what I've kind of learned over the years. All right, moving on. What can you do and what can you not do with your license? This is not an inclusive list. We will go over exactly what you can do and what you cannot do on Monday when we talk about federal aviation regulations. This is more of like an overview per se, just to kind of let you guys know what you're in for. If you got a whopping $5 to $6 million, you could buy a Pilatus PC-12 like this aircraft here. It's a single engine airplane. It's actually a single engine land airplane with retractable gear. And you could actually fly this by yourself. You would need a couple extra endorsements that we'll talk about once again on Monday. And really the sky's the limit with whatever your budget is. So, eventually you can upgrade to 2 engines. You can upgrade to a seaplane. You could do, the combinations are kind of endless when it comes to aviations and really what you want to spend at the end of the day. The majority of pilots out there, there's currently over 600,000 licensed pilots in the United States. Majority of them are going to be licensed under the private pilot. There are a couple other certificates that people can get, such as a sport pilot, which is a more recent invention of the FAA. A sport pilot is another opportunity. So for someone that may have medical issues, it's a little bit easier way of basically getting certified as a pilot. Now, as a sport pilot, you are basically limited to fly what is called a light sport aircraft, an LSA. And then there's also certain weight limitations, passenger constraints, and the list kind of goes on, but at least it gets you in the air. The other one is a recreational pilot. There's less than 200 of these in the United States. This was back in the 50s when the FAA had this idea, and same thing with the industry, of everyone was going to fly to work. So they basically made a reduced license in the sense that you could fly up to 50 nautical miles from your primary airport, go to work, come back home, and call it a day. So that one is not as common. So the most common one will be your private pilot license. For anybody here that is interested in sport pilot, or sometimes we have helicopter pilots, the information is relatively the same. For helicopter pilots, it's about 95% the same, except for a couple aerodynamic things like the vortex ring state and a couple new regulations. For anybody else that's hailing from outside the United States, 90% of what we're going to cover in this class is going to be applicable. Aviation is fairly universal. It's mainly the regulations that are slightly varied from country to country. So a private pilot at the end of the day is someone who flies for pleasure or personal business without accepting compensation for flying, except in very limited and specific circumstances. So what we usually like to say is that private pilots have the unlimited solo privileges to carry passengers and or cargo, as long as it's not for hire and or compensation. That's the official definition that we use. So basically, you can split the cost with your friends and family or whoever goes with you. So for example, if I fly out to Vegas and the entire rental costs $100 and I'm going with a friend of mine, I could split it $50 here and $50 there, 50-50 basically. If I go with 4 friends, I could get it down to $25 per person. The main thing is that the pilot in command, the person who's actually flying, is not profiting from the flight. So in order to basically get compensated or profit from that flight, then you need to have a commercial license, which is another license in itself that you have to kind of go through that process. So you can carry passengers and cargo, and you can also use the aircraft basically for the furtherance of a business. It is permitted. That's not permitted when you're a student pilot, but that is permitted once you're a licensed pilot. A private pilot may not be compensated in any way for services as a pilot. That's very important. So you can't just pick up and fly your friends for $3,000 to Vegas because they've got the cash burning a hole in their pocket. That's not the way this works. But you can split the cost, which is known as the pro rata share. Pro rata share is a fancy way of just saying splitting the cost. And that can only include flight expenses such as fuel or rental costs. That could also include oil as well. Doesn't include the insurance, the tie downs, the hangars, and all the other stuff in between. Okay. So with that, I'm going to share with you guys your very, very first FAA test question. Keep in mind, if you're on our website, please do not answer in the chat. Once the poll becomes open, it's not open quite yet. Let me open it up real quick. Once the poll becomes open on the right side, wherever the chat is located beneath where you actually are supposed to type, you'll see something that says vote. Click on the vote button and just go ahead and read away. If you're unsure of where it is, put a message in the chat and we'll answer it. For everybody else on YouTube or Facebook, unfortunately, we do not have these capabilities on those platforms. So make a mental note, write it down on a piece of paper. Do not share it. Don't give away the potential answer to your fellow students. All right, so back to the question. In regards to privileges and limitations, a private pilot may, is it A, not pay less than the pro rata share of the operating expenses of a flight with passengers, provided the expenses involve only fuel, oil, airport expenditures, or rental fees? B, act as pilot in command of an aircraft carrying a passenger for compensation if the flight is in connection with a business or employment? Or C, not be paid in any manner for the operating expenses of a flight? Right, got the first third of the class in. Thank you almost for throwing it in the chat there, or not throwing it in the chat. All right, there's about 50%. And as I said, the list that we just went over is a pretty short summary. There's a lot more detail to that discussion that we'll have on Monday once we actually dig into the regulations. Jamal, no worries, no worries. I think you said, sir, that you're in the United Aviate program. That's pretty cool. So that'll actually put you in the United crowd pretty soon after a couple of years. All right, coming to a close here. Got about 90%. Just waiting for a few stragglers to find that vote button, and then we'll call it out. That's awesome, Jamal. Roxy, you're also going to be in Aviate. That's awesome. Yeah, I love how the airlines are doing all these programs. JetBlue came out with one. Delta came out with one. United came out with one. So trying to help out with that pilot shortage out there. All right, I'm going to close it out. I apologize if I cut off anybody here, but it looks like we got majority of the class in. So 86% of the class has the correct answer. It is A. We had about 5% on B and a few people on C there. So it is not pay less than the pro rata share, which is that equal share of the operating expenses of a flight with passengers, provided the expenses involve only fuel, oil, airport expenditures, or rental fees. So there are certain times when you can get reimbursed, for basically your flight expenses beyond this. We're going to talk about those more on Monday. But some examples would be if you're participating in search and rescue for, let's say, the Civil Air Patrol, or you are potentially donating the flight for a recognized 501c3 charity. That is another opportunity that you can be reimbursed, mainly on the tax side, to get compensated. Okay. All right, moving along here. This is the final little thing I'll give you guys for anybody that kind of wants to know the order. And there's really no right or wrong order, but this is the most logical order that most people follow. So for most of us, we will probably end up with the private pilot license, and it has that 40-hour minimum. So like I said, if you guys go over and if you're the 100-hour pilot that gets your private pilot license and you want to become a professional pilot, don't worry about it, because guess what? You need those hours to become a commercial pilot anyways. All the hours that you have, regardless if you did them 10 years ago or if you just did them yesterday, they all count in your logbook. Your hours never, ever expire. So private pilot is the most basic level. Private pilot is really for recreational purposes, learning purposes, just kind of go out and have fun. The big thing with private pilot, though, is you cannot fly through we're going to talk more about certain weather conditions, but you basically need to have enough visibility in and around clouds and forward visibility to get you in and around the airports. The next license, the most logical step that most people take, is the instrument pilot. This is where we train you to solely fly by the flight instruments and not look outside. So we traditionally have you fly an additional 50 cross-country flight hours, and you also have 40 hours of hood time or simulated instrument or actual IFR time, which is instrument flight rules. And this is basically teaching you all about, we in this class teach you all about VFR. This one is teaching you about the instrument flight rules, which is a whole separate class in itself. We're actually teaching that at the end of this month if anybody's interested. So that basically allows you to fly in those conditions that are less than VFR in and through clouds, and they basically allow you to, execute different approaches and departures and those types of things. On your way up, then the next logical step that most people take if they want to get paid or potentially reduce, some people just get a commercial license because it reduces your insurance for your own personal aircraft, it's a 250-hour minimum. You basically learn about controlling the aircraft and finessing the aircraft with different maneuvers, and that's really your commercial. Once you're done with your commercial, then all bets are off. You could, if you're lucky, pick up a commercial flying gig, dropping skydivers, doing photography. If you're really lucky, you might be able to get a gig as a charter pilot, flying for business jets and those types of things, get a type rating. Some people will end up getting their multi-engine license here, and they'll get a commercial multi-engine. Some people will end up becoming a certified flight instructor, and I only encourage you to do that if you enjoy teaching. Do not do it just to build hours. And the end goal for most people professionally is to get to that wonderful 1,500 hour mark. You need 1,500 hours in order to become an airline transport pilot. And this is where you could officially get hired by the airlines. Typically, you'll start at a regional and then work for them for a couple years and then go up to a major or a low-cost carrier, whatever kind of suits your personal lifestyle. So really, once you become a commercial pilot, this is officially where you stop paying for your flights and other people actually start paying you. So a lot of people look forward to that. But like I said, a lot of people, this is the most common route if you're trying to get to, the airline side. Some people have no interest in it, but there's a lot of different avenues that you can take depending on wherever your passions lie, and a lot of things you can do in and around aviation as well. Okay, that's a lot of talking. A couple minutes early here. So before I continue, do you guys have any questions about the course or the private pilot license, the medical, or anything else that I covered that I may have missed thus far? If weather changes and you happen to be stuck in IFR, what happens with the FAA? So once again, you have certain weather limitations, Pat, that you have to abide by. If you're just a private pilot, you can't fly. You're just going to ground yourself and wait for the weather to become better. So it's as simple as that. If you're up in the air, like Alex said, then obviously that's a whole different story. So is there a difference in insurance between the levels? So traditionally, the more hours that you have in terms of flight experience, and also, if you have a commercial license, you're actually, if you just get an instrument license, instrument rating attached to your private pilot, your insurance actually goes down substantially. If you get a commercial, it goes down a little bit more. But in addition to that, they look at how many flight hours you have. Basically, how much experience do you have? Traditionally, you are the riskiest in the first 1,000 hours of flight when it comes to the insurance companies. That's when you're doing most of your learning and kind of doing that. Okay. Daniel looked up the AME locations, but it doesn't have all of the address and contact info. Unfortunately, just make sure you use that FAA website. I'm surprised it's not on there. If not, what I do is just highlight the doctor's name and do a Google search, and you can probably track them down. Okay. Glider rating. If you already have any type of license from the FAA, you do not need a student pilot certificate. That would just be a category change, Charles, so you'll be good there. Okay. Third class is good for, Lorraine is asking how long the medicals are good for. So just for the purposes of our class, the third class is basically valid for 60 calendar months if you're below 40. It's valid for 24 calendar months if you're above 40. And second class is going to be valid for roughly the same time period, and first class is valid the same thing. The main thing is that it's a little bit different. So like a first class medical is only valid if you're below 40. It's valid for 12 calendar months, and then it basically the rights and privileges changes to a third class medical for the balance of the time. It's a little bit more complicated. I'm sure we could find a chart on that for you. Okay. Do you need a student pilot license for sport training? Yes, you do. Okay. All right, I'm going to pause there with the questions as long as there's not too many more. But once again, I'm going to go ahead and push on so we can finish on time today. So as I said the other day, this is moving into the aerodynamics section. So first thing we're going to talk about is aircraft components. So every single airplane is basically the same. They all come in different shapes, sizes, but there's really kind of just a few main components when we look at them. We have the power plant. So most of the general aviation power plants are going to be driven by propeller. Obviously, if we look at airliners, they're generally going to be driven by some type of turbine, so some type of turbine jet. But for most of us, the power plant on the prop side, or propeller, prop for short, that is actually pulling us through the air. There's 99% of the general aviation aircraft are actually pulling us through the air. There's one or two out there like the Skymaster, the Cessna Skymaster, that's a push-pull plane. That's a very odd configuration. The center section is called the fuselage. This is where basically we live, the pilots, the passengers, the cargo, anything else that you're basically storing in the aircraft will go within this location. And then attached to that, you have the wings in green. So obviously a right wing and a left wing. With those wings, the wing is the thing. The wing and the shape of the wing, or what we call the camber of the wing. And there's an upper camber and a lower camber, which is basically the upper, just think of it as the top part of the wing and the bottom part of the wing. That is what allows this airplane to fly. And we'll talk more about that when we go into Bernoulli's principle after break. Attached to that is a landing gear. For most of us, we're going to be dealing with either two types of landing gear, either fixed gear, meaning it's always down. There's nothing that we can do. We can never bring it up. Or there's a retractable landing gear in more advanced aircraft where you can actually bring it up after takeoff and basically extend it prior to landing when you're coming back in. On the tail here, you've got the empennage, and the empennage is basically consisting of two different devices. We have a vertical stabilizer right here, and then we have a horizontal stabilizer going in the other direction, and we actually have flight controls that are basically attached to either one of these. So, moving forward, looking at even a C-130, it has the same components. Obviously, it has a few extra things here. We have a fuselage with the cockpit. Now, obviously, this has 4 different power plants instead of just a single power plant. We have the wings that provide the lift, and we have flaps that are attached to it. So some people were asking what flaps are. Flaps are usually on the inboard section of the wings, located kind of horrible drawing right about here. And what the flaps do is they basically extend and they change the shape of the wing, or they basically change the camber of the wing. And what they allow pilots to do, you'll see them if you're ever sitting next to, or if you're either on the ground watching an airplane come in, or if you ever are sitting on the window seat kind of by the over the wings on a commercial airliner. They're extended usually for coming into land. And what they do is they allow for a steeper descent, and you don't actually pick up additional airspeed. And it actually reduces the stalling speed, meaning the airplane can come in slower when it is coming in for a landing rather than faster. Beyond that, we also have our ailerons. So the ailerons are usually located in the outboard section over here, and they're also located over here. The ailerons allow us to basically turn right or left, or what we call roll the aircraft right or left. The tail end is that empennage. A lot of these are French words as well. So the vertical stabilizer is that top portion, and attached to the vertical stabilizer in the back is the rudder. This is the rudder portion right there. The bottom portion of that is going to be called your horizontal stabilizer. Reason why we call it horizontal is it's basically placed horizontal. And on the tail end, on both sides, you have the elevator here and here. Okay, so those are the most common components of your aircraft as you kind of go along. All right, give me like 3 more minutes so I can cover the motion of the aircraft, and then we'll take that 5-minute break, and we'll come back here. All right, so you have 3 different primary flight controls, and then you have secondary flight controls. Your primary flight controls are your ailerons, your elevator, and your rudder. So the first one is going to be your ailerons. So the ailerons, like I said, are on the outboard portion of the wing, and they move in opposite directions. So for example, if one aileron is up, and keep in mind this is completely exaggerated, the other one is going to be deflected in the down position. So they're going to move proportional to each other. But there's always going to be one up and one down unless they're in what we call the trailing position, which is effectively neutral. The way that this works is this is actually controlled using your yoke. So if you twist the yoke to the left or to the right, it will actually move those ailerons up or down, and then you will roll to the right or to the left. Okay, you can think of it as like a turn. This is based upon the longitudinal axis of motion. So if you were to draw a straight line from the spinner, which is the very, very front of the aircraft where the prop is, all the way to the tail, that is the longitudinal axis. And you can clearly see here are your ailerons. The white section that is not highlighted are actually the flaps, which are further inboard, closer to the fuselage themselves. Okay. All right. The next one we have is your elevator. Your elevator is attached to your horizontal stabilizer. So here's your horizontal stabilizer, and the elevator is usually this back portion that's not very well defined. We can see it a little bit clearer in the image on the left-hand side. This is going to move you about the lateral axis, and very simply, this is moving the yoke. So instead of twisting the yoke right or left, if you pull the yoke all the way to your chest, the nose of that airplane is going to lift up. Okay, so you're basically going to climb, you're going to gain altitude. If you push that yoke all the way away from your chest and towards the flight instruments, or what we call the firewall, you will descend. So that's basically going to lose altitude when you do so. So that is your elevator. Traditionally, the elevator is located on both sides, and every manufacturer is a little bit different. If you're flying a Piper, we call these stabilators. It's one giant elevator instead of 2 components like you see here. Very simply, there is a trailing position, which is neutral, meaning that it's not pointed up or down, and the elevator itself, if it is pointing up in this capacity, that will end up happening is it's going to, by raising the elevator, it's going to force the tail down and the nose up, which means that you would actually climb. If you have it in the down position, because we're basically changing the way that the aerodynamics are flowing over this, by lowering the elevator forces, the tail is going to go up, the nose is going to go down. The main thing you want to pay attention to is nose down, which means that the airplane is going to descend and go closer to the ground. Okay. All right, the last one I want to cover here, and then we'll take that break, is going to be your rudder. Your rudder is kind of a new thing for most of you, so this is based upon your vertical axis. Wherever the center of gravity is in your aircraft, which is usually somewhere through the fuselage, if you were to draw a line straight through it, that is your vertical axis. Your vertical axis is controlled by the rudder, so we can see here that white portion, that is going to be your vertical stabilizer. The portion in yellow is going to be the rudder that is attached to the vertical stabilizer. So it's usually this little section right here when we're looking at it. This allows us to yaw right and left, and the way that we control this is not through the yoke, but normally if you guys drive a car, you'll have a gas pedal and a brake. In this case, you will have two different pedals. You'll have a left rudder pedal and a right rudder pedal. And when you're on the ground and the weight is on the front wheel, the caster wheel, not the caster wheel, but basically it's engaging the nose wheel there, and you step on the right or the left, this is what allows you to turn and taxi the airplane, and that's how you move around. It's a little bit, it's funny to watch everybody get into an airplane for the first time because everybody's trying to steer it with with basically the yoke like a steering wheel. It doesn't work that way. We actually control that with our feet. So if we want the airplane to go right on the ground, we hit the right rudder, we go left, same thing. Once we're in the air though, that actually controls the rudder in the back as well. So this allows us to yaw. This is not how we turn right or left, but this is primarily used to stay coordinated. We're going to talk more about coordinated flight and using the turn coordinator and how to apply the right amount of rudder pressure depending on what's actually going on in real time during the flight. Okay. Woo. All right, so with that, got 3 minutes past the hour here. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. When we come back, I'm going to show you guys a quick video on aerodynamics, and we're going to move into the 3 laws, Newton's laws. We'll go into, actually all 3 of his laws. We'll go into Bernoulli's principle, talk about the 4 forces, then we'll go into stalls, and we will call it a night after that. With that, stretch your legs, grab something to eat or whatever else you need, rehydrate, and I'll see everybody back in 5. right, everybody, welcome back from that final break here. As we move on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share roughly a 6-minute video with you. This is on the aerodynamics, kind of a little intro video to kind of try to put together what we said and using a bit more animation. And this will have a good discussion leading into some more of the finer points that we'll need to talk about with aerodynamics and how an airplane actually flies. So with that, let's go ahead and watch how an airplane works or flies, and we'll talk about it when we come back.
If you have ever flown on an airplane, you know that it's an enormous-sized, amazing machine. A typical 747 can carry more than 500 passengers and weighs around 800,000 pounds when taking off. Yet it rolls down the runway at a speed of 290 kilometers per hour, and as though by magic, lifts itself into the air and can travel up to 13,000 kilometers without stopping. Incredible, isn't it? Today, we are going to learn how an airplane flies in a very simple way by going through the aerodynamics of an airplane, the main parts of an airplane, and controlling the airplane. The aerodynamics of an airplane. The 4 aerodynamics of an airplane are drag, thrust, weight, and lift. Drag, also called air resistance, refers to the forces acting opposite to the relative motion of any object moving with respect to a surrounding fluid. The energy it takes to push through the surrounding fluid creates drag. You may have noticed an excellent example of drag reduction in track cycling. The cyclist must push through the mass of air in front, but a streamlined sitting posture that cuts through the air more smoothly enables a cyclist to travel much faster, with less effort. The airplane always retracts its landing gear and nose gear into the body of the plane after takeoff to reduce drag. Thrust counters drag. It is a mechanical force that keeps the airplane moving in the air. Thrust is generated by propellers, jet engines, or rockets. The compressor inside the jet engine takes the air and compresses it, and after processing from the combustion chamber and turbine, the gas is blown out through the exhaust nozzle. Here, Newton's third law of motion is applied, where the gas is pushed backward and the engine is pushed forward. Weight is the airplane body, passenger, and luggage weight in total. Lift overcomes the weight and holds the airplane in the air. Lift is created mostly by wings to keep the plane aloft. So, to keep the airplane moving, flying straight, and level, this must be true. Which means no net force acting upon an airplane. In any case, if drag is greater than thrust, the plane slows down. If thrust is greater than drag, the plane moves faster. If weight is greater than lift, the plane descends. If lift is greater than weight, the plane climbs. Parts of an airplane. The basic parts of an airplane are 1. Wings, 2. Horizontal stabilizer, and 3. Vertical stabilizer. The wing is the most important part of an airplane, since it produces lift that allows a plane to fly. A wing produces lift because of its slightly inclined and special shape, which is called an airfoil. This special shape is designed to deflect the air at the bottom of the wing due to more airstrikes at the bottom and less air at the top of the wing. As the airplane rolls down the runway, higher pressure and more upward force produces below the wing, and lower pressure and lesser downward force above the wing. The net result is the lifting of an airplane. Stabilizer. Stability in an airplane is a tendency to return to its initial state after a disturbance from that state. Horizontal stabilizer performs this function when the disturbance force causes the nose of an airplane to move up or down. Such movement is called pitch. Vertical stabilizer provides stability for a disturbance in yaw. Yaw is side-to-side motion of the nose. Controlling the airplane. So what are the components in an airplane which control the flight, direction, and height, and maintain the equilibrium? It's elevator, rudder, and aileron. The elevator can be deflected up or down to produce a change in the downforce produced by the horizontal tail. If the elevator is deflected upward, it increases the downforce produced by the horizontal tail, causing the nose to pitch upward. If the elevator is deflected downward, then the counteracting force causes the nose to pitch down. The rudder can be deflected to either side to produce a change in the side force produced by the vertical tail. If the rudder is deflected towards the right, it creates a side force to the left, which causes the nose to yaw to the right. If the rudder is deflected towards the left, it creates a side force to the right, which causes the nose to yaw to the left. Ailerons are located on the tips of each wing. Ailerons can be used to generate a rolling motion for an aircraft. Ailerons usually work in opposition. If the right aileron is deflected upward, then left is deflected downward, and vice versa. Let's see this. To curve the flight path, the pilot deflects one wing to move up and the other wing to move down by controlling the ailerons. With the left aileron in downwards direction, the lift will increase, whereas at the same time, the aileron of the right wing is in the upward position. Therefore, lift on the right wing is decreased. The result will roll the aircraft to the right. If the pilot reverses the aileron deflection, right aileron down, left up, the right wing will lift up and the airplane will roll to the left. The next time you travel in an airplane, you'll know how it works. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to my channel for more videos. And don't...
All right, everybody, so hopefully that'll put a few more of the pieces of the puzzle together. The next thing we're going to do is look at an FAA test question. I just opened up the poll. Very simply, remember to answer in the poll. Just use the vote function. This is a pretty simple one. And try not to answer in the chat if you can't help it there. What is the purpose of the rudder on an airplane? Is it A, to control yaw, B, to control overbanking tendency, or C, to control roll? Got the first third of a class in. Vote button is underneath the chat. So if you go to the bottom where you normally type a message in the chat, there is something that will probably say, what is the, and then it cuts off and it says vote to the right of that big blue button. Yeah, and for those that are trying to keep up with the notes, we do have the notes for each one of the classes. I think it's in that course companion guide that we put out. I think there's like 120 pages of notes plus all the handouts too. I got about 80% of everybody in. All right. Sorry to cut off anybody, but let's go ahead and run through it. We got about 93% of the class with the correct answers. So the purpose of the rudder on the airplane is to control yaw. That is correct. We got a few people on B and C, but to control overbanking tendency, that's actually incorrect because it's the aileron control that controls the overbanking. And then C is also incorrect because roll is controlled by the aileron. So those are two completely different systems or flight controls when we look at them. All right, moving on to the theories in production of lift and kind of talking about aerodynamics. Keep in mind that when we're looking at aerodynamics, this is really just a very surface level course. I know that sometimes we have engineers out there in our classes. There are some more advanced books, like there's an FAA book out there, and it's called the Aerodynamics for Naval Aviators, which basically goes through the calculus and the physics and everything. So if you want all the math behind it, I would encourage you guys to take a look at those books. Those are actually free because they're printed by the government. And it goes into far more detail than what we are going to be able to cover in this class. So very simply, we are looking at a wing, and this is also known as an airfoil. And as you can see, the wing is shaped in a very specific fashion. And it's this shape that basically allows the air to basically separate in what we call this is called the upper camber on the top, and we've got the lower camber on the bottom. And we'll talk about the parts of the wing here in a second. But what ends up happening here is that in this wind tunnel, you can clearly see that the wing is basically rising. And what we would say is the angle of attack is increasing to the point where there is separation at the very, very tail end here. Let's see if I can pause it right about there. Okay, actually it won't let me pause it, but there's separation right at the trailing edge here, and that's what's actually what will lead to the stall, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit towards the end of class. So there's several different parts of a wing. We talked about these briefly yesterday. So the very, very front of a wing is known as the leading edge, and that's basically right here. Very, very back part of a wing is called the trailing edge. And the shape or design, if we were to look at this, we have the upper camber, which is basically the upper shape of basically the top portion of the wing. And we have the lower camber, which is the bottom portion of the wing as well. Now, if you were to draw an imaginary line from the trailing edge to the leading edge and out in front of the airplane, that is called the chord line. So that is basically this dotted imaginary line right here that basically goes out indefinitely. And then you also have the relative wind that basically is hitting the very, very front part or the leading edge of that wing. Now, the angle, the difference between the relative wind and the chord line is known as the angle of attack. And this is something that you do want to know, because this is what we're going to talk about a lot moving forward. So this angle right here is basically the angle or the difference between the relative wind and that chord line, that imaginary line that goes out from basically the trailing edge to the leading edge in front of the airplane, and that is known as the angle of attack. Now, let me move on here. Moving on, and we'll talk about like how a wing actually flies or what actually creates lift here. But let's go through some of the basics from your high school physics class. That is. There are three basic laws of motion. So from Newton, we've got Newton's first law, which is every object will remain uniform unless acted upon by an external force. So a good example of this is an airplane or an object will move when a force is applied to it. Newton's second law is force equals the mass times the acceleration. So the acceleration rate of an object is directly proportional to the applied force and inversely proportional to its inverse mass. So more simply said, the more force we apply, the faster that object's going to go, the more acceleration that we're going to get out of it. And finally, Newton's third law is for every action, there is a equal and opposite reaction. So for thrust, there's drag. For P factor, and basically when we have thrust, for example, we will talk about these things called left-hand turning tendencies tomorrow in class, where the airplane naturally wants to turn to the left. There's four different causes of those left-hand turning tendencies, primarily found in prop-driven aircraft. The next one we're going to talk about is a gentleman named Bernoulli that is basically defines what happens if you were to basically send a fluid or a gas or a liquid through a venturi. Very simply, this is a venturi, and this is basically representing the shape of a wing, the curved top portion of a wing. And if you look at the opening and the closing, or basically the front and the end of that venturi, two things that we're kind of looking for is that the velocity and the pressure are basically the same there. And same thing with the end of that tube as well. The velocity and the pressure are the same, but where that restriction happens within that venturi right there, the throat of that venturi, what you see is that the velocity actually increases, so the air increases and the pressure decreases. And what Bernoulli's principle says is that this is what happens over that upper camber, that top portion of the airplane wing, because of that unique shape. The velocity, or in this case, the air, is going to increase. It's going to go faster, and the pressure is going to decrease because of that. So if we were to apply this to Bernoulli's principle, that shape of the wing, which is basically designed by engineers, here's the leading edge, right? And the thing that I'll kind of point out here is that upper camber of the wing, because it's shaped the way it is, if we were to take a string and go from the leading edge to the trailing edge, and do the exact same thing with the lower camber, what you would actually find is that the upper camber is ever so slightly longer. The string will be slightly longer than the lower camber. So the air has a little bit further to travel on the upper portion of the wing than it does on the bottom portion of the wing. Now, because of this, on the upper portion of the wing, we have the air is actually going to speed up. And because it speeds up, it gives us that low pressure. And on the bottom portion of the wing, it is a slower speed, and it gives us that higher pressure. Okay, so because of that, that low pressure on top and the high pressure on the bottom, air naturally wants to always equalize. So it basically flows from high pressure to low pressure. And that's what actually generates lift and gets the airplane off the ground. Okay, so lift is the result of a pressure difference between the top and the bottom of the wing. Wing is designed to accelerate air over the top camber of the wing, thereby decreasing the pressure on the top and thus producing lift. All right, the next one is your airfoil design. So in airfoil, we use this term kind of interchangeably. So obviously a wing is an airfoil. It's that shape of that wing, that design of the wing that produces lift. The other thing too is that if you were to look, I'm not a good drawer, if you were to look at a prop, there's usually a 2 or 3 blade prop. That prop also is called an airfoil, and it's a unique design that basically it can basically convert the power that the engine is providing, and it converts that power into thrust, and it pulls that aircraft forward. So that's specifically what it does. The shape of that airfoil and the design of the airfoil shape of the wing creates the lift, and then as the speed builds, it actually lifts the airplane off the ground. And then remember that all of those primary control surfaces that we talked about, the rudder, the elevator, and the ailerons, are what we use as pilots to basically control that airplane and make it maneuverable and controllable for us, right? All right, let's look at another, looks like 2 FAA test questions here. Test your knowledge. Please remember to answer in the poll only. First one is dealing with Bernoulli. So which statement relates to Bernoulli's principle? Is it A, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction? B, an additional upward force is generated as the lower surface of the wing deflects air downward? Or C, air traveling faster over the curved upper surface of an airfoil causes lower pressure on the top surface? All right, got the first third of the class in. And about 75%. Thank you again for not answering in the chat. Takes a couple of tries to get everybody on board with that. For our East Coasters that need to drop off, like I said before at the beginning of class, not a problem. You guys can catch the recording. We'll post it about 2 hours, 3 hours after class, depending on how long it takes us to get that transcoded. You can always pick it up at the end as well. But we do understand it does get late over there this time of hour. We'll try to wrap up everything, by the way, everybody, in about 40 minutes or so. I think I can get everything done, maybe a little bit less, depending if there's any questions. All right, let's take a look at it. We got 6% with A, 5% with B, and the majority of the class, 87, almost 88% with C. So the statement that best relates to Bernoulli's principle, or in this case, the only one, is going to be C. Air traveling faster over the curved upper surface of an airfoil causes lower pressure on the top surface. That's the whole point of Bernoulli's principle, right? If anyone said A, that's incorrect because that's actually Newton's third law of motion. Same thing with B as well. It's actually incorrect because that's also referring to the third law. All right, let's look at one more dealing with angle of attack. The term angle of attack is defined as the angle, is it A, between the wing chord line and the relative wind, B, between the airplane's climb angle and the horizon, or C, formed by the longitudinal axis of an airplane and the chord line of the wing? First third is in so far. Oh, Cody, I just stopped talking for a sec, so there should still be sound, everybody. Trying to give you guys as much mental power as you need for these questions. Got about 75% of the class in. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at it. Sorry if I'm cutting off anybody. I see a few last minute answers in there. We've got 79% with A, 5% with B, and 14, 15-ish percent with C. The majority of the class has it. The term angle of attack is defined as the angle between the wing chord line and the relative wind. For anybody that said B, that's actually incorrect because there's actually no specific term for the airplane's climb angle on the horizon. Anybody that said C, you guys are advanced students, that's called the angle of incidence, which is something we've never talked about either. I only try to give you guys test questions that we talk about for actually providing them. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the four forces, basically what gets these airplanes off the ground and flying. There are traditionally four forces, and they each oppose each other. So we have thrust that basically pulls the airplane along, drag, which counteracts the thrust. We have lift, which lifts it up with the wings that we talked about before. And then we have weight, which counteracts the lift. So the only time that these are all equal is when the airplane is basically in straight and level unaccelerated flight. That's when all four forces are actually going to be equal. You might see that on an FA test question on your quizzes. First one we have is thrust. Thrust is a pretty easy one to cover. Basically, it's the aircraft engine that provides the power, but it's that airfoil shape that we talked about before from the propeller that converts the power into thrust and then pulls the airplane forward. For everything that we're going to be dealing with, we're going to be talking about props and propellers in this airplane. We don't talk about jet engines or anything like that. Thrust always acts parallel to the longitudinal axis. However, there's a couple cases that it doesn't necessarily do so. So I can't always say always then. Drag is what is the resist thrust. It's the opposite. And drag is the force that resists the movement of the aircraft through the air. There's two basic types of drag. There's parasite or parasitic drag and induced drag. So drag that is not associated with the production of lift is called parasitic drag, and it increases as the square of the airspeed. So basically, as you go faster, parasite drag will start to increase. And this is comprised of forces that slow the aircraft movement. So these are things like form drag, like anything sticking out from the airplane. There's also interference drag and skin friction drag. That's all part of number one. Number two is induced drag. So induced drag is actually highest at slowest airspeeds, and the faster that you go, the induced drag actually decreases. And it's caused by the same factors that produce lift. Amount varies inversely with airspeed. So as airspeed decreases, the angle of attack must be increased. Meaning we actually have to increase pulling back on your yoke to basically keep that airplane at the same altitude. So going into the parasitic drag, here are the three subtypes of parasitic drag. We have form drag, which is literally anything that sticks out into the airstream. So wheels, antennas, rivets, anything that's really not smooth and perfectly buttoned down. We have interference drag, and the best example I can give you for this is if we look at a fuselage and we have the wing coming off of that fuselage, the interference comes from these little eddy currents and the turbulence in between, located right there, basically where the wing meets the fuselage. And it basically restricts the smooth airflow because it's just kind of in a specific position where the airflow is nice and smooth over the entire wing, but in this little corner here, it becomes a bit restricted. The last one is skin friction drag. This is aerodynamic resistance due to the contact of moving air with the skin surface. So very simply, your aircraft is not perfectly smooth, no matter how smooth you think it is. There's always going to be some type of resistance due to basically that the friction of the skin and the air. Between that, we have our drag curve. So this is basically looking at the induced drag and your parasitic drag together. So as I said before, your induced drag is always going to be the highest point at lower airspeed. So the lowest airspeed, you can kind of think of that as the 0 mark. That's your lowest drag and your lowest airspeed. And as you actually increase in speed, your induced drag becomes less. Now, the problem with that is your parasitic drag, which is all those things sticking out that we talked about, all the wheels, rivets, antennas, the interference drag, and the skin drag, that starts to increase as your airspeed increases in proportion. So the red line at the very top is called your total drag curve, and this is just adding the parasitic drag and the induced drag together. And what you have here is that the lowest point, horrible line, the lowest point of the center there, right there, that is the point where the drag is the least. It's going to be called your most efficient speed, and it's the one at which the airfoil or your wing can generate the maximum lift and the minimum drag. So this is where you get your maximum glide distance, and this is a value that's calculated by the manufacturer. They give it to you. So if you ever lost an engine, you want to obviously have the best opportunity to make it to an airport or a safe place to land. So you'd want to actually use that airspeed, which is providing you the least amount of drag to get you as far as possible to wherever you need to go. On the tail end of that, this is your stall speed over here, which is the very top part or the beginning part of the total drag curve. So if you go any slower than this, you're not going to be able to generate enough lift to stay at the altitude, thus you stall. We'll talk more about stalls here moving forward right before the end of class. The last one that we have before we get into lift again is weight. So weight is just the combined load of the aircraft itself. So we have an entire class on weight and balance and how to calculate that. But this includes the actual aircraft itself, what we call the basic empty weight, the crew, the fuel, the cargo, the bags. And this is the downward force on the airplane caused by gravity, which opposes lift, and it always acts straight downward because it is gravity. The last one that we have is going to be called lift. We talked a little bit about this before. So lift opposes the downward force of weight and is produced by the dynamic effect of the air acting on the airfoil. It always acts perpendicular to the flight path through the center of lift. Okay. All right, now one of the byproducts of lift is going to be these things called wingtip vortices. So anytime that an aircraft is airborne, whether it's small or large, you're going to see these wingtip vortices, not necessarily see them, but they will be there. Most of the time you cannot see wingtip vortices because it's just a basically spiraling airflow that comes off of each one of the wingtips. Here, this is a NASA video, so they're actually flying an aircraft to demonstrate this. You can usually see it if an aircraft is also flying out of the clouds or a fog bank as well. Every aircraft will develop these, and anytime that lift is generated, you will see these. So once the wheels are off the ground, then every aircraft will have some type of wingtip vortices. The reason why we're talking about them is that with wingtip vortices, what will end up happening is that as the wing kind of moves forward, it's actually creating a spiral of air that's trailing off of the wing tips, and it comes off of each of the wing tips, the right wing tip and the left wing tip, and it will start to spiral outward and upward, and then it will usually go inward and then kind of tuck behind the wing as well. So the reason why this is important, and here's another view of that as well, just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. The reason why this is important is that wingtip vortices create this hazard called wake turbulence. I don't know if anyone here has ever jet skied or been on a lake. If you have like a large boat that passes you, that boat creates a wake in the actual water that you can physically see. It's very much the same thing, but it's making a wake with the air. And if a smaller airplane gets trapped in a larger wake, that can pose a hazard specifically during the takeoff and landing phases where, if you're a little tiny two-seater airplane following a large 747, if you get close enough and you get stuck in that aircraft's wake, it's enough to definitely flip and roll the airplane and potentially cause structural damage as well. So the intensity of the wake turbulence is going to be dependent upon the aircraft size, speed, and the configuration. The configuration is, does it gear up, gear down? Is it full flaps? Is it no flaps? Those types of things. But the one that you want to know, and there is an FA test question that you'll probably see, is that the strongest vortices are produced by heavy aircraft flying slow with wing flaps and landing gear retracted. So what we like to say is heavy, slow, and clean. Usually this is on the departure phase of flight. Large jet aircraft can generate these vortices, and they can persist for many minutes. So air traffic control will traditionally give you about 1 to 3 miles of spacing, depending on the size of the aircraft that you're following. But at the end of the day, it's your discretion as the pilot in command to determine if you think that's enough separation or not. So they have the ability to kind of go with where the wind goes. So if the wind has the ability to basically have these wingtip vortices or this wake turbulence kind of stay in place for a longer period of time, depending on the conditions that you are flying in. Now, there's a couple different ways to avoid wake turbulence. Obviously, don't fly directly behind a large aircraft. And with that, the wake turbulence in normal conditions will generally sink about 500 to 1,000 feet per minute. And obviously you want to avoid that area. If you're going to follow something like that, you obviously want to be in a position that would put you a bit higher than that aircraft to avoid that area. And when we're coming in or to land or we're coming in to take off, we have a couple different things that we can do to avoid it. So as soon as that large aircraft comes in and the wheels touch the ground, the lift is stopped being generated. So that's when the wake turbulence ends. So very simply, if you're following another aircraft in, the best thing to do is figure out where they actually touch down. So if that's their touchdown point, you want to land beyond the point that other aircraft touched down. If you're taking off and you note that their rotation, basically when the pilot starts pulling back, is in that point, you're going to basically rotate or take off prior to that aircraft, and you're basically going to try to stay outside of that wake and potentially ask for an early turnout as well. Now, this is also important if you're at an airport that has parallel runways. So some airports, you might have a runway that are basically side by side. And if you have a large jet aircraft that's taking off, and if the wind is blowing in the right direction as they take off, those wake, basically that wake turbulence has the ability to kind of go to the other parallel runway. So that's something that you should also caution yourself with as well. Okay. All right, the last one, actually the last two that we're going to talk about is just ground effect, and we'll talk about stalls, and we'll be out of here. So ground effect is going to occur within one wingspan or less above the surface of the Earth, and the airflow around the wing and the wingtips is actually modified, and the resulting pattern reduces the downwash and the induced drag. So these changes can result in the aircraft becoming airborne before reaching the recommended takeoff speed or floating during an approach to land. So this is really an area, as I said before, that once you're above the ground within one wingspan, you're going to get kind of this area or improved performance. And ground effect is, as I said, simply a reduction of induced drag, because as the aircraft in flight becomes within one wingspan of the length of the surface, there's a change in the three-dimensional airflow. Okay, so with this, I think this is a better image. This is one from Rod Machado. If the airplane is outside of ground effect, right, don't worry about all these arrows and everything else. The main thing is that the wingtip, pay attention to the arrow, this white arrow, the wingtip vortices in the back. And the wingtip vortices are really what we're kind of paying attention to, because the three-dimensional airflow in and around this aircraft with the downwash and everything else, if it's not near the ground or if it's above that one wingspan, it basically acts in the traditional manner. But when you get within one wingspan of the runway or the ground, that 3D airflow is interrupted, mainly because of the fact that you have this giant piece of pavement or dirt, whatever you're landing on, and that airflow is basically redirected up, and it kind of creates this cushion. Okay, so the wingtip vortices thus downwash having decreased, and they also allow total lift to tilt forward. And very simply, the result of ground, the effective ground effect is just that it kind of creates this artificial bump in performance when you're closer to the ground due to that change of the three-dimensional airflow when we're looking at it. Okay, so it does depend on the size of the plane as well. There's three different categories of wake turbulence the FAA defines. It's low, medium, or high. Basically, all of you guys in general aviation will be low. Some of the business jets are medium, and then pretty much most airliners out there, 747, 750. 757 is actually the worst one out there. Those are all going to be high wake turbulence categories. Okay. All right, I wanted to cover this final FAA test question. We'll cover stalls, and then we'll get out of here at the top of the hour, preferably a little bit sooner. So what is ground effect? Is it A, the result of interference of the surface of the Earth with the airflow patterns of an airplane? B, the result of an alteration in airflow patterns increasing induced drag about the wings of an airplane? C, the result of disruption of the airflow patterns about the wings of an airplane to the point where the wings will no longer support the airplane in flight? Poll is open. Answer in the poll only. All right, got the first third of the class in. Eric, when it talks about heavy, there's a certain classification. I know it's in the AIM. I can look it up though, unless Missy or Alex may know it. I don't. It may deal with the wake turbulence, but there also may be another reason. I'm not entirely sure. There is a classification in what is how the FAA determines heavy or not. All right, got about 2/3 in. All right, it looks like just about everybody. Apologize if I cut you guys off. We got 80% with A, 12% with B, and the balance of the class with C. The A is the majority of the class does have it correct. What is ground effect? It's the result of the interference of the surface of the Earth with the airflow patterns. So those are the same 3D airflow patterns that we're talking about. For anybody that said B, that we did use the word induced drag. I know that's a buzzword, but the problem with it is it's not increasing, it's actually decreasing induced drag. So if you saw something related to that, then that would have been correct. But because they're using the word increasing, that's actually not correct. And C is actually incorrect because when we look at it, because the disruption of the wingtip vortices actually increases lift, it doesn't decrease lift as well. So right here, it's saying that wings will no longer support the airplane, which means it decreases lift. In this case, it's actually increasing lift when we look at that. All right. Good job, everybody. All right, moving on to stalls. So a stall is something that can occur at really any airspeed, any configuration at any point in flight. Could be a high-speed stall or a low-speed stall. High-speed stalls we call accelerated stalls. You guys will have an opportunity to practice stalls as well. You guys will practice both departure stalls and approach to landing stalls. So you'll practice basically a stall with full power, and you'll also practice a stall with no power as well, and the recovery methods behind them once you're early on in your training. So very simply, a stall is going to be a rapid decrease in lift caused by the separation of airflow from the wing's surface brought on by exceeding the critical angle of attack. So like you saw in the very beginning video, that GIF that I showed you guys with that wing in the air tunnel, you could see this is what we call the smooth laminar airflow. Basically, all of this air is pretty much, you can kind of think of it pretty close or glued to the very top portion of the wing. And that's what we mean. But if you start to increase the angle of attack, meaning you start to pitch up, and remember, the angle of attack is that imaginary chord line and the angle of the relative wind. As that starts to increase, that smooth laminar airflow is going to start to get disrupted, and it usually starts to get disrupted from the rear of the airplane, and then it starts to make its way forward to the point where the wing is not going to be able to generate enough lift. It doesn't generate zero lift, but it cannot generate enough lift to sustain that aircraft in flight. So important thing here is a stall can occur at any pitch attitude or airspeed, does not matter. And then in a stall, the wing does not totally stop producing lift. Rather, it just cannot generate enough lift. Most of the aircraft out there, when you exceed the critical angle of attack, it will stall regardless. So most aircraft are going to be somewhere between 16 to 22 degrees. And that's something that's basically defined by the engineering process and the manufacturers. There's a couple different types of stalls. Like I said, you guys will practice the low speed stalls. So these are your practice stalls, and basically your angle of attack has to be increased, meaning that the slower that you go, if you want to maintain 3,000 feet, you have to continually basically pointing that nose higher and higher in the sky. Otherwise, you're going to start to kind of do a flat descent, and eventually you will exceed the critical angle of attack and you will stall. A high-speed stall, another way that we call these are going to be accelerated stalls. You would practice these. We actually, everybody practice these in a commercial. If you're working on a commercial license, you get to practice these. But very simply, if you were to, in this example, if you were to go into a dive and you hit 100 knots and you pulled back as hard as you could, the aircraft is going to stall. Okay. If you change the angle of attack very, very quickly from low to high, you'll exceed it and the aircraft will stall. Same thing goes when we do our accelerated stalls for our commercial. We usually have students in a 50-degree bank, and then we pull up, or 45-degree bank to the right or left, and then we pull up, and that's basically demonstrating that accelerated stall. The other one that we'll talk about tomorrow is turning. Very, very simply, that if we turn, depending on our bank angle, once we get to 60 degrees, we're actually pulling 2 Gs in the airplane. So if the airplane is pulling 2 Gs, it's going to weigh 2 times more than it used to, and you may not have enough lift to basically sustain the weight of that aircraft to stay in flight. So very simply, anytime that you get into a stall, the number one thing that we do is we decrease the angle of attack. So we point the nose slightly down, we increase the power. We basically want more airflow to go over those wings, and then we regain control of the aircraft. So you guys will learn the step-by-step procedures of kind of what that looks like. In the last example before we go tonight, we have a Diamond DA-40 aircraft, and they are basically showing you guys a stall in progress. What the company did was they effectively took the Diamond wing and they basically taped a bunch of strings to it. And what you want to pay attention to is the strings at the very, very trailing edge, the back portion of the wing. And what will end up happening is that this pilot is inevitably increasing their attitude, and to the point where it's going to exceed the critical angle of attack. And pay attention to all those noodles. That is the stall right about there where they all go crazy, because you have separation. Remember at the end of the day that it wants that smooth laminar airflow over the entire wing. And what will end up happening is when we get that separation, it's not going to be able to sustain lift, and what will end up happening is the nose will drop. Now the recovery, as I said before, is pretty simple. Drop the nose below the horizon, increase the power, and you just want to get more airflow going over those wings. There's the stall again. Drops the nose, recovers. Here it is a little bit slower, 50% slower. We can see that the pilot is actually banking up. Their angle of attack is increasing. They exceed it. And you have separation on the very, very trailing edge of the wing there. Okay. Recovery is very simple. Push the nose forward and recover. So anytime that the aircraft is basically experiencing this, and potentially if it is going to be in a stall or potentially a spin, this could lead to a spin if you're not careful. The main thing that you guys will learn is kind of the recovery procedures. You'll also learn spin recovery procedures depending on the aircraft that you're in, either pair or reap, and then kind of go from there. All right, so with that is everything that I wanted to cover for the purposes of today to kind of play catch up with round number 2 here. So thanks again, everybody, for hanging out and participating. Seems like we had about 211 people on tonight through all the platforms. So hopefully this is the way that we wanted to do this yesterday. Unfortunately, things happen. So we will make the effort to make it right and get everybody through, so that way you guys have the information on hand. With that, I am going to stick around. If you have any more questions, we will resume our normal classes tomorrow, which is Wednesday. That is going to be September 8th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. This recording will be up, and we're going to replace the old recording because I don't like it. So this will be up in the next few hours. It'll also be up on the mobile device later tonight as well. But thanks again, everybody, for hanging out, and we will talk to you guys and gals tomorrow. Do appreciate it. Like I said, thanks again for giving us another chance here. Hwanju, good to see you from South Korea out there. Have you back in class. We will see you tomorrow. Thanks again to all the moderators. Remember, the moderators do this on a volunteer basis. So, Missy, and we've got Cezanne. We also have Alex. We have moderator Cody out there. We've got Ryan and a few others as well. So thank you again for showing up. Do appreciate it, that extra day here. But great to have everybody back in class. All right. I know it went by a little faster. It always goes by faster, Nathaniel, when we got smaller classes because there's less questions. It's actually a little easier to teach that in that way. Less confusion, but I'm sure we'll see the 1,000 people in class tomorrow that we had the first day. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Thank you again. With that, if there's any questions that we were not able to answer, feel free to shoot us a help desk ticket, or you can even post it. You can post a message in the Facebook group as well if it's not, if it's just a generic question out there. And we'll pick it up tomorrow. So there's still a little bit of aerodynamics that we need to cover for the purposes of tomorrow. We're going to cover left-hand turning tendencies. Then we're going to cover the G-forces in terms of the load factors. And then we're going to move directly into aircraft systems and so forth. So let's see. Mike, you bought your Sporties Ground School. Awesome. So you got the E6B calculator. Great. Make sure you read the instructions before you come to class at the end there. All right, so with that, I am going to step out. We'll leave the chat open for the next 8 or 10 minutes. You can ask or fire away any last-minute questions out there, but need to save my voice for tomorrow and the rest of the week here. Other than that, been a pleasure teaching you guys again. This is the way we want things to kind of go off without a hitch. So, but you know how technology goes. Other than that, great to have everybody back, and we will see everybody tomorrow at 5 p.m. for the continuation of lesson number 2. So with that, take care, everyone. Have a great night.